All right, thank you. Welcome to our Tuesday, September 14th, 2021 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. In accordance with the Governor's Executive Order N-0821, which suspends portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. A physical location has not been provided for this meeting. All directors, including myself, are participating remotely. Please call roll, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Oops.
Uh-oh. She was here. I'm sorry. Give me one moment. Okay. Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Young.
Yep, I'm here.
President Lenny.
Present. If members of the public wish to make public comment at this time, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allotted time has been concluded.
We have two.
Madam Secretary.
Yes.
Okay.
2 members for public comment. Justin should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, President Lenny, Board of Directors, General Manager Clifford Chan, and the fellow EBMUD employees and guests. My name is Justin Young, and I'm an Associate Electrical Engineer and Chair for Contracting Out Committee for Local 2019. We want to bring attention to a $15 million contract for plant inspection services for capital improvement projects that will be on consent calendar next board meeting on September 28th. This is typical work our district construction inspectors perform at water treatment plants, pumping plants, reservoirs, and pipelines. We understand and appreciate the capital improvement project study will be completed in the spring, mentioned by General Manager Clifford Chan in the Planning Committee. The union is requesting to look into staffing appropriately in the Design and Construction Division for typical district work when this study is completed. I'll repeat what I said to the Planning Committee. It's important the Board of Directors are clearly told which capital projects work is being contracted out. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Eric L. Eric, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Good morning. Thank you, Risha. This is Eric Larson, President, AFSCME Local 444. Good morning, President Lenny, directors, and General Manager Chan. Today, the CPI was reported by Bureau of Labor Statistics. The San Francisco Bay Area is experiencing significant inflationary pressures. The Bay Area CPI for April 2021 increased 4.1%. June was up 4.3%, and now in August it's up 4.9%. At the same time, 2013 PEPRA member contribution rates have increased by 0.75%, resulting in less take-home pay in their pocket. Labor shortages in the Bay Area are putting pressure on wages, making it difficult for the district to recruit and retain high-quality candidates. Heavy equipment operators can't pass our tests because the applicants don't have the skills we require at East Bay Municipal Utility District. The heavy equipment operators who don't apply for jobs here because they require more money. Our water distribution plumber 3 and plumber 4s are the best of the best, on par with the city of San Francisco, not Napa or Sonoma County, to which they're compared in the total compensation study, bringing their salary into the middle, the average of the comparator agencies. Similarly, there are ground maintenance specialists who the district rely on for fire abatement work, critical to protection of safety, and are recognized by community groups throughout the Bay Area, providing fire protection for the communities around which our facilities exist. Our janitors continue to clean and maintain our facilities in the safe and sanitary conditions throughout the pandemic. All of these classifications were found to be in the middle, average. But we're not mediocre, we're the best of the best. We've been sent to Napa to rebuild their systems after the earthquake in Napa. We've been sent to Sonoma, to Santa Rosa to rebuild after the fires. We're the best of the best, not average, mediocre employees, and we should be compensated like. These and others have asked for equity adjustments to recognize the value and unique knowledge, skills, and abilities brought to the district. And all of these workers and all of AFSCME 444 represented workers have been here every day during the pandemic, with the exception of a short shutdown of construction in the beginning. We have been here on the job, repairing main breaks, replacing old pipe, reading meters, cutting back brush, repairing vehicles, cleaning facilities, treating sewage, repairing equipment, and running our systems to provide the highest quality water service and wastewater treatment to the community which we serve. Our working conditions were deemed so hazardous, at one point we were mandated regular COVID testing, but every request for hazard pay has been rejected. Now the district is mandating vaccinations. Personally, I'm confident in the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, so I am vaccinated, and I encourage others to get vaccinated. And if they have questions, I recommend they should talk to their doctor. I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. In fact, the district doesn't employ a medical doctor. And so in responses to our questions, such as providing a list of all known risks and potential side effects of each vaccine, provide a list of all known suspected adverse reactions to the vaccine, provide the number of vaccinated or non-vaccinated patients currently hospitalized. The district replies the district does not possess documents responsive to such request. We find
Eric, your 3 minutes.
Get vaccinated or get fired. Thank you, Risha. I'll wrap it up.
Okay, thanks.
Get vaccinated or get fired is rather draconian, and we object. AFSCME 444 has taken a position by vote of our membership objecting to mandatory vaccinations and request weekly testing as an option available for those uncomfortable with the vaccine. Just provide the test option consistent with other agencies in the Department of Labor. If our skilled workforce are caused to separate over this issue, you will not be able to replace them at the wages you're paying. AFSCME 444 represented employees have been the most impacted by this pandemic, and we've been here every day, and there's no work from home for us. There's mandated testing, and now there's mandated vaccines with no testing options. We're just asking, give us a testing option and give us the wages that we deserve. Thank you for your time.
Do we have any other speakers?
We do. Next, we have Yvette Rivera. You should be able to unmute your mic. And
Thank you, Risha.
You're welcome. Your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. A few weeks ago, I spoke in front of the board, and this board said that the Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce lawsuit against Laura Costa, Craig Spencer, and East Bay Mud had allegations that were unfounded. I'm always going to assume that until public records show me otherwise, that it was an abuse of power by Craig Spencer's mentee, Derek McDonald, East Bay Mud General Counsel, to go through this board of directors to publicly state an unfounded determination about that civil rights lawsuit. It will never make sense to me how you could flippantly infer that two brilliant attorneys, Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce, would file a frivolous lawsuit through an accomplished civil rights attorney, Pamela Price, a Yale graduate with a master's and JD from UC Berkeley. even in my own civil rights lawsuit against East Bay Mud, I'm sure many of you assumed that I didn't have any allegations to support my my lawsuit. In that lawsuit, the United States of America, Ninth Circuit Federal Court determined that a trier of fact could conclude that East Bay Mud's purported reasons for its adverse actions against Rivera were pretextual, and that East Bay Mud was more likely motivated by a retaliatory purpose. I'm here to, I guess, suggest that before this board of directors makes such flippant determinations about any civil rights lawsuit presented to East Bay Mud, that they review the United States EEOC 2016 manual on the enforcement guidance for retaliation and related issues. I could go on and read what a materially adverse action is, and it doesn't mean that you get fired. All it means is that the actions could dissuade a reasonable person from engaging in protected activity. And I'm going to stop here because I could read all of the things. Actually, I could tell you about all the things that continue to happen to me at East Bay Mud. And it's textbook retaliation. But again, I am going to end this by suggesting that this board of directors reviews the United States EEOC 2016 enforcement guidance on retaliation and related issues before making flippant determinations on East Bay Mud employee civil rights lawsuit against the district. Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Yes, we have Brandon Battiati. Brandon, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Hello.
And yes, your 3
Good
minutes
afternoon.
will start now.
Okay, as she said, my name is Brandon Battiati. I've been at the district almost 14 years now. I'm the second vice president of Local 444. I'd like to talk about the mandate a little bit. By mandating a vaccine that has caused adverse reactions, some minor, some severe, and even death, you are essentially telling me that your opinion of the vaccine is more important to you than my life or others. Because you or I don't know if I might be one of the people that the vaccine kills until it's in my system, and at that point, there's no taking it out, and it is too late. You are letting the fear of COVID-19 make you abuse your power as the board of directors and mandate me to get something that might take my life, no matter how small the chance, there is a chance. Why do that when masks and social distancing have proven to work? COVID-19 can't be cured. It is like the flu. It will constantly mutate, so it is here to stay like the flu. All these other vaccine mandates that people refer to, like smallpox and polio, all those diseases were able to be eradicated. That cannot happen with COVID. So again, mandating us to get a vaccine that is not stopping the spread, and people who are vaccinated still can catch and spread the virus, is wrong. It should not be mandated. You might think to yourself, you don't know anyone that has any severe adverse reactions, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. I personally do not know anyone who was healthy that has died from COVID, but I know that they're out there. So I'll leave you with this. What makes your fear of COVID-19 more valid than my fear of the vaccine and possible adverse reactions? According to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System in the USA, there has been 13,627 deaths, 17,794 permanently disabled, and 6,071 heart attacks. I think my fear of getting vaccinated are valid, just as your fears of COVID are valid. I ask you, don't make us get vaccinated. If the shoe was on the other foot and my friends and family wanted to get vaccinated and it was being kept from them, I would fight just as hard for them to get what they wanted. Thank you.
I would appreciate seeing a copy of that report that Brandon quoted, please.
Yeah, I'll get it to you guys.
Please, thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Next we have, excuse me, next we have Casey Evans. Casey, you should be able to unmute your mic.
You read. Good morning, everyone.
You're breaking up, Casey.
Oh, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Risha, for the director. Our manager can. I just wanted to come and, I decided a few years ago after being told to straighten my hair to work here and being sexually harassed on the floor and, having to suck that up to work here. And I made a decision that when I see something that I would say something. And so I am here to say something. For someone who's been here 15 years, I thought I had seen the tops of the level of where the district treats me like property. And it really saddens me to see that it's not just in the halls. It's coming from the top. I have served this district for 15 years, inside the office, out, and in many different departments. I have done what I can to bridge the gap between, just to make it a more humongous place, because that's what I thought. I thought I was just running into a few bad eggs. But after receiving an email with a direct order of what my body needs to do, and that this board feels like you own me enough to be able to tell me what to do with my body, is insulting. I've told this board before, the people that work here aren't here to get rich. We actually care about the district. We care about you. We care about our other staff. We care about the public. And we have done above and beyond to keep this place running. And then to be told 15 years later, I'm not good enough to work here. And to add salt to the injury, I haven't worked in your offices for 10 years. For 10 years, I have not had to come into that office for anything. And yet you still treat me like cattle. You still treat me like property. So I just want to come here and let you know, don't ever come and talk about values. Don't ever come in here and talk about diversity, because you treat your staff like you own them, like they're property. And I want this board to recognize that, and the general manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey, for sharing that with us.
We have no other public commenters.
All right, and then we will move to convene or to discuss closed session agenda items, and we'll return for our regular meeting at 1:15.
Welcome to our Tuesday, September 14th, 2021 regular business meeting of the East Bay MUD Board of Directors. In accordance with the Governor's Executive Order N0821, which suspends the portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. A physical location has not been provided for this meeting. The Planning Committee met this morning and will report out under item 15. All directors, including myself, are participating remotely. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman,
Present.
Director Katz,
Present.
Director McIntosh, Director Millen,
Present.
Director Patterson,
Present.
Director Young,
I'm here.
President Lenny.
Here. All right, at this time, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are no announcements required from closed session. We are on to public comment. If members of the public wish to speak on items on the agenda or not on the agenda, please raise your hand feature. Use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard right now at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will be heard when those items are up. When prompted, please share your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes to speak, However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. Secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allotted time has concluded.
We have one speaker for public comment. Justin Young, there are more coming, President Lenny, but right now we have Justin Young. Justin, your 3 minutes will start now.
Okay, thank you, Risha. Good afternoon, President Lenny and the board of directors, General Manager Chan, fellow East Bay MUD employees, and the public. My name is Justin Young, and I'm an associate electrical engineer at the district for 17 years. Local 2019 is requesting more effort be put into equity adjustments during negotiations. Human Resources shared with the union a total compensation study last week, and once again, associate electrical engineers are being compared to associate civil engineers. Associate electrical engineers have been trying to be heard for 5 years. Electrical engineers aren't civil engineers. The salary between electrical and civil are growing, and the district is falling behind other agencies. How do we know that we're falling behind? Human Resources listened to the board's request to perform a salary survey for associate electrical engineers, and Human Resources shared these results with the union in June of 2020. This survey not only showed the district falling below the comparator agencies, but 3 agencies, Contra Costa, Santa Clara, and Zone 7, have paid 5% more to their electrical control systems engineers. This salary survey wasn't included in the total compensation study used for equity adjustments during negotiations. We are asking why associate electrical engineer salary survey is benchmarked against an associate civil engineer classification when Human Resources performed a salary survey for associate electrical engineers. Associate electrical engineers will continue to have difficulty recruiting and retaining until we address this issue. The issue has been known, but it's time to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Next, we have George Cleveland. George, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Excuse me. Good afternoon, President Lenny, the Board of Directors, General Manager Chan, and anyone else that's in attendance. I have a couple things to talk about. First, the vaccine mandate and the testing. I'm not entirely certain that Local 2019 was familiar with this consent form that's come out. I heard that it was used like when there was testing previously at the service yards, but we have a total of, I think, 6 members in our local spread amongst the yards. So there's a concern about that, especially the part with the waiver of claims where you're saying, I willingly and knowingly consent to this. I find that problematic on 2 levels. One is the overall idea that test or lose your job. And as a subset of that, there are people who have concerns about it for various reasons, but the one I focused on is someone who is immunocompromised and cannot get the COVID vaccine. So you're putting those individuals in an extremely difficult, and I would say very unfair position with this. And I don't know why this is out there. I know that I'm thinking that if you get shots at other places or vaccines or tests or what have you, such as like a CVS or Walgreens, I'm not sure if they have you sign a waiver that says if something happens to the shot, too bad, so sad. If you die, that's tough and you can't do anything about it. I think that's wrong. Connected to this, we had today or yesterday what I'm going to call another data breach. Some of our managers, they're instructed, hey, you need to notify the people who need to be tested that they need to be tested. Do it in the email. Okay, fine, blind copy them. Well, we had an instance where one group was not blind copied. They were just copied. So everybody knows who is and isn't vaccinated in this particular group. And that's a problem because, that's sensitive private health information that does not need to be shared, but it was. So it's just another example of cavalier attitudes with district information. It's wrong. And now I'm going to pivot to negotiations. you know, we're still at it. In our last negotiation session, we said, you know, we understand that the district position on raises in the second, third, and fourth year of the contract is just the consumer price index without a what we call the plus component. And to the lead negotiator's credit, he said, very transparent, said, well, I haven't been granted authority by the board of directors to include a plus component. I said, okay. We've said this before, that CPI on its own does not really represent a raise, it's just keeping up. The plus component is what constitutes the actual raise. And the other reason that we're looking for the plus component is the majority of our members now are what I'll call PEPRA eligible. And, you know, as part of the law, which district has said it's not our problem to fix, as part of that law, you know, they had an increase in the percentage of their retirement contribution. I believe it was either earlier this year or late last year. So they don't have as much money coming into their pockets as they used to. And if anything, a CPI, a plus component, even something very modest, would be, to me, a sign of good faith that district understands the concern, is going to at least somewhat of an offset of those costs.
George,
you know,
your 3 minutes have concluded. Please wrap up your comments.
Okay, I just want to say we were also told again that the district doesn't have the money, that the reasons for that are the drought, the pandemic, and now wildfires. And I don't know. I don't see how that is, because I think balance sheets show something different, and the customer water bills are going to be paid by other means. So I don't think that our lead negotiator should be telling us that the district can't afford it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Next, we have Barb Sorensen. You should be able to unmute your mic.
Hi, it's not Barb Sorensen, it's Nick Lawrence using Barb's computer.
Okay, your 3 minutes will start now.
I present today episode number 3 of the dangerous condition of public property, which exists on Tappan Terrace in Orinda by virtue of the defective fire hydrant and its water supply. Since the last episode, number 2, when I spoke on this subject, Carlton Chan, along with David Renstrom, both of the district, did make a sales call on me up on Tappan Terrace in an attempt to persuade me that a 4-inch rubber hose was equal in performance to an 8-inch steel pipe. I told the two of them that I disagreed with their claim and asked for, and they agreed they would provide engineering calculations that would demonstrate that a 4-inch rubber hose will deliver the performance of the 8-inch steel pipe, which the district has removed from service. I've not received those calculations yet, and this serves as my request to the board to cause those to be forthcoming. The fire hydrant on Tappan Terrace is still defective. It's a danger to the community. It's served by a 2-inch rubber hose. It's totally insufficient for its intended purpose, and it presents a risk to the families and homes of myself, my neighbors, and the neighborhood in general. Additionally, I'd like to call your attention that the 2-inch rubber hose is not only defective up on Tappan Terrace, but it is exposed above ground on Ichabod Lane, a block away, where it is adjacent to the roadway and subject to damage by UPS trucks and resident vehicle traffic. It's also unlocked, unsecure, can be readily tampered with, and it's not good. I've requested to learn how this subject could become an agenda item so that you there, members of the board, might ask questions and we could discuss this more fully. And I've not learned yet how to cause this to be an agenda item. This is my request that happen. I'll be filing an additional public records request act on this subject, and would request that I get printed copies of the information relevant to my request. On a second item, unrelated to the dangerous condition of public property on Tappan Terrace, I want to report an incident that occurred at the district's Lafayette Reservoir facility. While there last week on the 10th, I was running, and I happened to run past a tractor operated by an East Bay MUD employee. And the tractor was pulling debris, plant debris, dirt, and poison oak. And I was unavoidably exposed to windblown dirt and, more importantly, to poison oak, residue, dust, whatever. While I understand that the operator of the tractor, that was tractor number 1535, was probably protected against this, I did observe that there was an East Bay MUD employee, a female, who was outside the tractor, and she was similarly exposed. The problem isn't the dirt, that washes off, but when people are exposed to poison oak in the air, they can cause, it can cause serious poison oak reactions. The district's aware of poison oak. They've got big warning signs around it, and for the most part, seem to be doing a decent job of keeping it off the paved trail. But this was a unexpected and unpleasant experience to get sprayed with dust from all of the poison oak and the dirt and what have you. If anybody's interested, I can provide photographs of the tractor, and I can identify the employee in question. But it struck me that this might be a training issue that might be addressed about making sure when you're in windy conditions and you're nearby where the public goes, make sure that you're not throwing up poison oak dust. It's really nasty. I've had it before, and it's no fun. That's my Lafayette Reservoir report. I believe the district has my contact information if they'd like more information about that incident. And I thank you very much.
So Clifford, we can have somebody reach out to Mr. Lawrence about the incident at the reservoir.
We can do that. And
Director Coleman?
I have a question for Clifford. Can we get a memo? I'd like to know from an integrity standpoint, from a fire standpoint, if a fire were to be in the Tappan area or any place else, how a rubber hose is going to hold up versus a metal pipeline in terms of could a fire put in jeopardy the integrity of the hose versus a metal pipe?
we can provide a memo on that.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Yvette Rivera. You should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. I just want to start off by saying I spoke for about 3 minutes this morning before the start of the closed board meeting. Right after I spoke, Casey Evans passionately described what appeared to sound like a discrimination and harassment experience at East Bay MUD. Because East Bay MUD has elected to remove all live feed recordings of the East Bay MUD meetings in the morning, the public comment session in the morning, I am going to start posting all of the recordings on my YouTube page. Okay, so for today, this afternoon, I want to happily report that Craig Spencer, one of the defendants of the Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce civil rights lawsuit at East Bay MUD, is no longer an employee at East Bay MUD, as he finally has separated from the district as of August 31st, 2021. Since Craig Spencer's last contract dated September 9th, 2019 stated that it was set to expire on July 15th, 2022, it appears to me that Mr. Spencer's contract was terminated early and that he likely entered into some type of employment termination agreement. Unfortunately, I made several CPRA requests asking for any type of retirement or settlement agreement with Craig Spencer before August 28th. But since he resigned or retired on August 31st, I'm going to make new CPRA requests I'll do them here and then I'll follow it up with an email. So for CPRA request number 1, please provide all documents related to Craig Spencer's resignation, including and not limited to any releases and waivers. Number 2, all documents related to Craig Spencer's retirement, including and not limited to any releases and waivers. Request number 3, please provide all documents related to Laura Acosta's hiring, specifically all contracts. The reason I want to look at these contracts for Ms. Acosta is because upon reviewing Craig Spencer's contract, I believe that there is a loophole that circumvents policy 2.17, exclusions of severance pay. In Mr. Spencer's contract, it says severance pay and health insurance coverage that has been paid under this paragraph shall be reimbursed by the general counsel to the district in the event that general counsel is convicted of a crime involving an abuse of his office or position. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe it's against public policy to include a provision in an East Bay MUD employment contract that says general counsel has to be convicted of a crime to forfeit severance pay. I believe discrimination and retaliation complaints are torts, not criminal offenses, as evidenced by the government tort complaints filed by Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland. State law, Government Code 53243.4 and District Policy 2.17 exclude East Bay MUD officers' right to severance pay where the employee is involuntarily terminated for a long list of things, including but not limited to inattention to public service, unlawful discrimination, unlawful retaliation, and there's a few more, but they're only in one part of this policy does it say conviction of a felony or misdemeanor.
Yvette, your 3 minutes are up. Can you please conclude your comments?
Yes, I think I'm gonna leave it at that. I'll follow up this public comment with an email, again, asking for those public documents. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Are there any other speakers?
No, that was our last public speaker.
All right. That concludes public comment then. We're now on to the consent calendar. We have 9 items for consideration. Anyone need to pull an item or do I have a motion?
I move the consent calendar, Doug.
I'll second.
Motion by Director McIntosh, second by Director Mellon. We will have a roll call vote then.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. So that carries unanimously. We're now on to determination and discussion. Item 10, we are going to review our vacation schedule. This is a question of whether we want to continue as we did this year with the the second July meeting being canceled for vacation, or whether we want to go back to August.
Well, I can personally say that I'd prefer to go back to August.
Well, I'm going to be the cynic here and say, my constituents think I'm always on vacation, so I don't know.
So it doesn't matter to you, all right?
Not a good thing.
I
Frank.
prefer August as well.
All right, I got 2 for August.
I'll go with the
Maria,
will of the majority, August or July, flexibility.
okay.
You see, you're just like me, John. Thank you.
Mhm. But not for the same reason.
Oh.
Marguerite, I think you were the one who
Yeah, I think I originally suggested this. Part of it was in deference to our staff and the fact that the school year has changed pretty much universally across the East Bay to an pretty early August start date. And so I'll stay with July because people who have kids shouldn't, that's why. So I'm sticking with, I'll vote for July.
All right, Clifford, do you have any comments from staff on one way or the other?
I have not heard anything from staff one way or the other, whether they preferred the second meeting in July versus the second meeting in August. Risha, would you like?
I'm flexible. Usually.
Can I ask our esteemed secretary, who really has her finger on the pulse, what her thoughts are? Since she's the one that has to, hurt us and shepherd us.
So when we had this conversation in May 2020, I checked with staff who have items presented to the board in June and July. And they determined rates and charges, for instance, in 2020. They determined that it did cause them to accelerate their timelines, but they were able to get the work done.
Thank you, Risha.
Yeah,
I
there's a
apologize
slight
for
preference
putting
for-
this on.
There is
August,
just one
what do you
item there is one item that we have to address in July, and that's the wet weather facility charge. And we have to conduct a public hearing each year. And if for some reason we don't have 5/7 of the board available to vote on that item, or if the board needs to take additional action and we can't complete the work needed to provide information to the counties by their August 10th deadline, then we could potentially miss out on putting those facility charges on the property tax rolls in Alameda and Contra Costa County. We were able to do that for the last 2 years, but each year, it's not on a budget year, we have to hold a public hearing for the facility charges each year. And that's the one thing to take into consideration. In August, every election year, the board has the option, if we have unopposed candidates, to exercise their AB 408 authority. And that the timeline for that, as stated in the memo, is usually short, and so you would have to conduct a special meeting to exercise your AB 408 authority.
And maybe I'll add, President Lenny, just if you look
And
at
that's
the,
in August, shortly after what would be the August vacation period.
Correct.
So it requires a special meeting during August, right?
Correct. That would be after, that time usually falls after the second meeting in August.
and if you look at the schedule for next August, if we are subject to AB 408, canceling the second board meeting in August probably wouldn't be an option, just given the compressed schedule and timeline.
Mhm.
Would not be an option. So it's kind of a moot question.
But we can do that meeting remotely if necessary.
Absolutely. As we've done in years prior.
Oh, my.
I mean, I'm sensitive to the fact that schools are starting, seems so early now. And Marguerite's position, I think, is valid. To put, it's an extra effort on staff, I guess, if they're making a decision when to take a family vacation. And then does that also potentially load up workloads earlier in the year to avoid by the meeting date? I mean, maybe the second meeting in August is not appropriate just from a standpoint of families and their vacations.
So I'm monitoring email and staff, just based on the work that's needed, the front-loaded work that's needed for items that are due in July, because it's not just the wet weather facility charge, it's also the multifamily lien program. They also have to prepare and provide information to the counties in advance of the August 10th deadline. And staff's goal is to have a set vacation schedule for the board. If it's July, or if it's July, or if it's August, but just to choose one vacation schedule, and then we'll work with that going forward.
I don't have a strong preference one way or the other. I serve at the pleasure of the board.
Oh, you don't hear that often.
But I pull that one out of the back pocket for
Uh-huh.
this occasion.
Was that a punt?
You know, normally the water is running better in July for river trips, but this year it didn't matter that much. So the only other criteria.
So I think what we're saying and what Risha is saying as well is, you know, we can make anything work at the end of the day, whether it's July or August. And it's just the preference of the board.
So I'm going to offer a suggestion. We address this in January of each year so that we can see where the dates would fall and we can appropriately schedule, because all we have to do, we don't have to have this set in iron, but we do have to give the staff some good information. So I say, let's kick the can down the road to January of each year.
Well, except that I'm
Frank,
hearing.
we know when the second and fourth Tuesday is of every year, like going out, you know,
I'm hearing
centuries.
that the staff would probably prefer to have a little bit more.
Something more firm.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Yes.
and then just kind of, hey, this year we're going to do it this time, this year we're going to do it that time.
Correct.
Well, I have two for August and one for July, and John's leaning, I'm sorry, two for July, one for August, and John's leaning August.
But I can go either which way.
Meaning July a second ago.
My big thing is really, it's how it impacts the staff and their families.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'll go with July, Doug, if that'll help you out.
That's assuming there's water for rafting.
Well, you know, there are some things I just don't do like I used to. And one of them is going roaring down a river. So.
All right. Well.
I can go either way, but I take my vacation in August of every year.
I just
So
would like
It's just
to,
what I do, and I will continue to do. So I can work with whatever the majority of the board decide.
I would also like to offer that during a rate, when we have to consider rates, the June, July time period could also be critical. And so I'm receiving emails from staff during the board meeting. And the front loading of I'm monitoring 3 screens. And the front
hot
loading of
topic.
work, the front loading for work for the multifamily lien program and for the wet weather facilities charge. It's a lot of calculations. It's a lot of behind the scenes work to get those done. Not trying to influence the board, but.
Well, we asked your opinion, Risa, so.
Right.
Is there a way?
Well, Risha
Yeah.
would prefer August. You ask my opinion.
Is there a
Risha
way
would
to
prefer
split the
August.
difference here and go for the first meeting in August?
I heard August was the preference.
That's just me.
Well, no, but the first meeting in August would give people from the second July meeting, there'd be some time. So how does that?
Yeah, it would get us out of July, and it would give families who start school in late August.
At least,
The time also.
well, they really start like August 9th, to be honest. I mean, they start before our first August board meeting, but it would help for sure if it was the first August meeting. Risha, what's the impact on that? Does that mess anything up?
I'm looking at emails. I'd have to go back and look at I polled staff in 2020, and the first meeting in August could be a good compromise, but it also depends on when that meeting fell and that August 10th deadline, if the board needed to act between the second meeting in July and the first meeting in August, specifically regarding the wet weather facility charge. and the multifamily lien program. We haven't had any issues over the years, but we never know.
But we could also do a special meeting, right?
Correct.
If we
And-
have to.
And if somebody's rafting or in the mountains without phone access, and specifically for the wet weather facility charge where you need 5 board members, you need 5 board members to approve the wet weather facility charge actions.
How many times have we had an issue with
We just,
not getting it done in July?
we haven't, we just actually started the process for the wet weather facility charges, I
Oh,
want to say
right,
in
right,
2019, correct. But I know that it's a lot of work in the front end to get the information that we need to provide to the counties for the tax rolls by August 10th.
But we wouldn't ordinarily be leaving it to, I mean, I would think in most years, August 10th is prior to the first board meeting in August
Hold on, I'm looking.
because of, you know, 7
Marguerite,
days.
you did ask for her opinion.
Yes, no, I'm just,
Now that you have it,
So for instance, in 2020, the
I'm-
first board meeting in August is August 9th.
So maybe instead of trying to figure all this out right now, we hear another option of the first board meeting in August. We made the second board meeting in July work this year. Historically, we've done the second board meeting in August. We hear 3 options. How about if we just, we'll look at that first board meeting in August, understand the impacts, and we'll come back at a future board meeting.
That sounds good
Thank
Sounds
you.
to
good.
me.
amen.
Glory, hallelujah.
All right, always a good option to kick the can down the road.
Just one board meeting.
Blink, blink.
All right, item 11.
So next, Risha will present the redistricting guidelines and criteria that was discussed with the redistricting ad hoc committee in June and August.
Good afternoon. All right, I will be presenting on the 2021-2022 redistricting guidelines and criteria. Next slide. Provide a brief background, brief discussion of the Fair Maps Act, the draft redistricting guidelines and criteria, recommendations and next steps, and also the proposed schedule that was discussed with the redistricting ad hoc committee at their August 24th meeting. Next slide. So as we know, section 11823 of the MUD Act requires the board by resolution or ordinance to fix the boundaries of the wards for the purpose of electing directors. And this is pursuant to Chapter 8 of the Election Code, starting at 22000, which states that the board is authorized to adjust the district boundaries every 10 years based on data from the U.S. Census. In February, the Census Bureau announced that due to COVID-19 and the pandemic, the data would not be released until October 2021. In prior redistricting efforts, the district received that information in February or March. To prepare for the redistricting at the district, given the compressed timeline, staff recommended the board act early to appoint an ad hoc committee. And in May 2021, the board appointed a redistricting ad hoc committee comprised of 3 members. Next slide. The ad hoc committee met on June 22nd and reviewed the redistricting guidelines and criteria used in 2011 and 12, and also provisions from the Fair Maps Act. Based on direction from the ad hoc committee, staff drafted guidelines and criteria, and we reviewed the draft guidelines and criteria at the August 24th meeting. Staff also reviewed the Fair Maps Act again, just noting some provisions that the district would have challenges meeting due to time constraints and staff limitations. As noted on the slide, the Fair Maps Act was enacted in 2019, and it's a really comprehensive act, and it amended election code provisions that are applicable to cities and counties, reminding the board that the Fair Maps Act does not apply to the district. When this information was presented to the ad hoc committee asked staff to consider implementing or following the Fair Maps Act to the extent possible. Based on feedback during the committee meetings, the committee directed staff, Robin, if you can advance to the next slide, directed staff to maintain transparency with our redistricting efforts and to adjust those efforts based on public interest and cost. And the guidelines that were presented on August 24th, the ad hoc committee asked staff to update them to clarify that the district would adhere to the provisions of the Fair Maps Act as much as reasonable. The board received an information memo on September 9th. We're not there yet. That's okay. The board received an information memo on September 9th, which included info on public interest in the 2011 and 2012 redistricting efforts. Staff reviewed the meeting minutes and correspondence from that time. The board held 6 meetings and 1 public hearing to allow members of the public to learn about and provide input regarding the proposed redistricting options. The meetings and hearings were noticed according to the Brown Act and according to the meeting minutes and correspondence. The meetings were primarily attended by board members and staff. The meeting minutes reflect that no members of the public provided written or verbal comments regarding the board's 2011-2012 redistricting efforts. So again, we updated the draft guidelines to say that the board would adhere to provisions of the Fair Maps Act as much as reasonable. Next slide. The one before that, I believe. Okay, so we're on to the next one. Yes. So the guidelines are largely unchanged from 2011-2012. One addition was we did add language regarding communities of interest based on information in the Fair Maps Act. And the guidelines are on the screen. I won't read them word for word, but achieving a precise equality of population among the wards as much as possible. Board member residences will be maintained within their current wards. We will follow city boundaries as closely as possible. Ethnic communities and/or communities of interest will be kept whole as nearly as possible. County precincts will not be split. Just wanted to provide a definition of communities of interest. A community of interest, according to the California Constitution, is a contiguous population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. Next slide. Staff updated the criteria to add more detail, but it's largely the same criteria from 2011-2012. Key language that was updated is to note that there are to be 2 public hearings as required under Election Code 22001. This criteria is a bit different. This criteria is different from what we did in 2011-2012 when the election code only required 1 public hearing. And so the criteria on the screen is brief, but it was expanded to establish an ad hoc committee comprised of 3 board members appointed by the board of directors to hold public meetings regarding the district's redistricting options. At least 1 public meeting of the ad hoc committee shall be held east of Hills for public review and comment on options for redistricting. We are researching, right now we're having our meetings remotely and online, but we are researching locations in Orinda or Richmond so that if the governor does not extend the executive order for remote meetings out to June 2022, then we will have a location in place for an East of Hills meeting. The ad hoc committee shall hold at least 2 public meetings prior to the first public hearing held by the Board of Directors. The ad hoc committee will propose alternative redistricting plans which reflect the total and eligible voting populations, racial and ethnic composition, and maps delineating district, city, and county boundaries to the extent this information is available. Options for redistricting plans shall be made available to the public at least 14 days prior to the first public hearing held by the board to consider the proposal for redistricting. Our meetings, again, right now are held remotely. And if the governor does not extend the executive order, which suspends provisions in the the Brown Act, then we would have meetings, we would conduct meetings in person with the proper precautions in place for safety. But right now we're working on holding meetings remotely. Next slide. You're there, okay. Documentation of the proposed redistricting plan to be adopted by the board shall be made available to the public at least 14 days prior to the scheduled public hearing on the vote on the final configuration. So again, the board will hold 2 public hearings. The first public hearing will be for the board to receive public comment and to approve the final plan presented by the ad hoc committee for a second public hearing where the board will vote to approve that final plan. Between those 2 public hearings, there can be no substantive, according to these criteria, no substantive amendments to the alternative plans or the final plan during the 14-day review period prior to the final vote on the ultimate redistricting configuration. And then the criteria just repeats that the board will hold those 2 public hearings. Those are the last 2 bullets. Next slide. So recommendation, we are asking that the board approve the 2021-2022 redistricting guidelines and criteria. Next steps, the redistricting ad hoc committee will meet over the next few months and use the guidelines and criteria to develop the redistricting plans for full board review and approval. Key is final ward boundaries and maps need to be approved by the board by March 2022 to submit to the counties in April 2022 for the November election. And I wanted to talk about the schedule that was presented to the ad hoc committee in August. You can go to the next slide and review the schedule with the board. So today we're having a meeting to adopt the redistricting guidelines, and at the next, on September 28th, the redistricting ad hoc committee will meet to determine the deviation. I have variance up there, but the deviation for population. And staff will also demonstrate the redistricting software at that redistricting ad hoc committee meeting. On October 26th, the redistricting ad hoc committee will start redistricting. The district received preliminary data from the U.S. Census Bureau, and we provided preliminary population information to the board in a September 9th information memo. That data should be updated and staff should receive that final data by October 21st for us to use for the October 26th redistricting committee meeting when we start the redistricting efforts. We have another redistricting ad hoc committee meeting scheduled for November 23rd. And the first schedule that was presented to the ad hoc committee had a special meeting for December 21st. We are now going to hold a redistricting ad hoc committee meeting on the 14th of December. And at that meeting, we are hoping that the committee will have a final plan option to present to the board at the first meeting in January 2022. If all goes well and the board approves that redistricting plan, we will hold the first public hearing on February 8th to receive public comment on that redistricting plan. In between these lines, there's a lot of work. There are legal notices that need to be published. There are notices that need to go to our elected officials. There's information that needs to be posted on the website, and there is work that needs to be performed by our GIS staff and our survey staff for mapping and for legal boundary purposes. Once we receive the public comment on February 8th, the board will conduct a second and final public hearing on March 8th to approve the final redistricting plan. March 8th is a key date because survey staff needs time to prepare the legal boundaries and the ward maps for the board to act on April 12th to approve those legal boundaries and descriptions by resolution. And this is all based on a deadline of April 7th, a county deadline of April 17th, 2022. Right now, there is Senate Bill 594, which was presented in August 16th, and as amended, would consolidate the 2022 deadline for special districts to adopt maps, adjusting their electoral division boundaries using the census data. This bill was amended to apply to special districts like fire protection districts, recreation and park districts, and community service districts, because their deadline for redistricting was November 1st. The counties, the bill would push that deadline out to April 17th, 2022. The counties wanted a deadline for all special districts for April 17th, 2022. And so this bill will make the deadline for all special districts, including East Bay MUD, April 17th, 2022. And so we're working on a tight timeline. There's a lot of work to be done by the Redistricting Ad Hoc Committee between October and January 2022. This is the proposed schedule, and I'm open to any questions or comments.
So again, I want to remind board members, this is a report out from the ad hoc committee. We've approved, or we are recommending the criteria and the timeline that has been proposed here.
I'll move the item, Doug. This is John.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Coleman, seconded by Director Patterson.
Before we take the vote, I was just advised we have one public comment.
Okay.
Okay, George, you can go ahead, and I am not at my desk, so I'm going to count on you for your 3 minutes. I'm going to watch the clock for you.
Oh, okay. I was going to speak for 10 minutes. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm actually speaking in my role as a ratepayer, and I'm wondering if the community of interest definition includes unincorporated communities like El Sobrante, because when I moved here many years ago, I was very surprised that I'm in Director Young's ward. I thought for sure I'd be in Director McIntosh's ward because El Sobrante and Richmond kind of commingle. And, you know, it's interesting that such a small community, we have maybe 12,000 people, one of the smallest of the district communities served, that were kind of chopped up. It's kind of ironic because El Sobrante in Spanish means the leftovers, and it was the parcel of land that was left over from the parcels of land that were doled out hundreds of years ago. So what I'm saying is hopefully that definition includes unincorporated communities like mine. The other hope is that perhaps that my community could be, I don't know if it could be redistricted or not, so that it's something that has more in common with Richmond and things like that, because frankly, we don't have anything really much in common with Oakland and Piedmont and the bulk of Director Young's ward. So that's all I have to say, and thank you for your consideration. And this is significantly less than 3 minutes, so thank you.
George, you put your foot in your mouth big time. If I were Marguerite, I wouldn't be a happy camper.
Oh, okay. It's not a question of happy
I
camp.
love my West County peaks.
Oh, I know you do. It's just we're kind of like out here away from everybody else. And it just surprised me. That's
No,
all. You represent us well.
The answer is that communities of interest does include places like El Sobrante.
Okay.
But you know, I call my district hugs the watershed. That's how I explain it geographically. But you know,
That's a clever description. I like that. I'll have to remember that. Thank you.
All right.
Oh,
Thank you, George.
George, I'm sorry, go ahead, Doug. George, the folks in San Ramon and San Leandro would take some umbrage to your position because San Ramon is split on me and San Leandro is, and I carry that with John and Doug and I carry a split San Leandro. You know,
Those are, yeah, but those are much
and there's
larger.
plenty of people in North Oakland who think I should have all of it, not share it with the Berkeley El Cerrito ward.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand that, Director Mellon, but El Sobrante is a much smaller community than San Leandro or San Ramon, physically, geographically, and population-wise. That's all.
If you get split, just a reminder, if you get split, you get 2 representatives. So
that's right.
Oh, there is that. That's true.
twice the work if you want to lobby them, but twice the representation if you look at it that way.
And
There you
that's how
go.
both San
Doug, the
Ramon
state
and
politics-
It appears
Leandro.
that Ward 4 is either crossing into Oakland or crossing into Richmond. So there's no perfect way to do this, but we try to look at these principles and do the best we can.
There's that
All right.
can again.
No, we're ready for a vote now on this.
I would move the recommendation of the. ad
We
hoc committee.
already have a motion and a second.
Oh, okay.
You're late to the party, Frank.
I'm sorry, I missed the party altogether. Okay.
Unless there's anything else, comments or otherwise, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, on to item 13.
Yes,
No,
thank
I'm
you.
sorry, on to item 12.
Thank you, Risha.
Well,
So
One,
next,
two, three.
next we have a presentation on the Los Vaqueros Reservoir Expansion Project. There are 3 actions for the board to consider. The first is to authorize me to execute the joint exercise of powers agreement. The second is to appoint a representative and an alternate to the board of the Los Vaqueros JPA. And the third is to authorize an amendment to the multi-party agreement. Mike Tognolini, Director of Water and Natural Resources, will make a brief presentation prior to the board discussing the 3 actions.
Good afternoon, President Linney and members of the board. As Clifford said, I have a very brief presentation. Staff is recommending for your consideration today 3 separate items, and I have 1 slide on each item. So I can go one at a time and have you take your actions, or I can just plow through and you can take your actions at the end.
Follow away.
The first item for consideration is for EBMUD to approve participation in the Los Vaqueros Reservoir Expansion Joint Exercise of Powers Agreement. What this essentially means is that we would be joining the JPA along with our other partner agencies, most of whom have already taken action. Actually, EBMUD is, along with Grasslands Water District, the last to take action, and Grasslands has moved up their consideration to this afternoon as well. So today, the last 2 agencies are considering whether or not to join. All of the other agencies have decided to join. And what joining this JPA really means is that we've extended the time. We're continuing our commitment to study and evaluate this project, and with off-ramps in place to further consider whether or not to make a final commitment to this project. And that final financial commitment to the project will likely happen within a 2-year time frame here as we negotiate and ultimately determine whether or not to execute a final funding agreement, what we call a service agreement, that will clearly define EBMUD's financial contribution as well as the benefits that we will receive from this project. But at this point in time, from the evaluation that staff has done, the project looks promising, and we're recommending that the board adopt a resolution to authorize the general manager to execute the JPA. The second item that we're asking the board to consider is assuming that the board adopts the resolution to execute the JPA. The second item is to select board members for appointment to the JPA. This would be an item that normally would be addressed in the beginning of the year by the board. But since we're in the middle of the year, we need to appoint board members to this JPA, assuming we decide to be a part of it, and that those board members would serve at the pleasure of the board. The board can make changes at any time, for example, at the beginning of next year when board assignments are typically made. The first meeting is expected to be in mid-November, and we need to appoint a representative within 30 days of execution of the JPA. The appointments can be revisited at any time and reviewed annually by the East Bay Mud Board. Board members are eligible to be members of the JPA as well as senior staff. And you can see from the table that we've included here that there's a combination. Many of our partner agencies have appointed board members. Others have appointed staff members. And then the third item for the board's consideration today is an amendment to the Los Vaqueros expansion multi-party agreement that would carry forward funding for the next year through December of 2022 that would allow for JPA administration, permitting, getting to 100% design of the dam, and continue to remain eligible for grant funding, which is a significant component of this project overall. So that commitment for East Bay Mud is a little less than $900,000 for the next 15 months. And with that, that's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you, Mike. We have 3 items. Probably want to consider them separately in terms of votes. John, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you very much, Doug. You know, I'm very happy to see where we are. And Mike, thank you for all your efforts on leading the discussions with all the parties. It really brought to mind the importance of this, because last night I was with John Berg from CCWD at the Pleasant Hill City Council this morning at the Walnut Creek Chamber with Ernie, and the importance of working together. I can recall not many years ago when our 2 agencies didn't even talk to each other, or if they did, it was between throwing legal things back and forth. We've really gone a long ways. I think this is an important project for not only East Bay Mud, but for the region, for the entire Bay Area as a whole, when you really get down to it. So I applaud our efforts on that. And if we're going to move the items separately, I'll move the first item, but I applaud staff for all the hard work they've done in trying to get us to where we are, as well as protecting our interest and protecting the interest of, really looking broadly, protecting all the interests of those who are in the Bay Area who would be part of the LB expansion.
Well said, John. I will second that.
All right, thank you, John. Well put. So we have a motion for item 12.1. It's been moved by Director Coleman, seconded by Director McIntosh. Any further discussion, comments? Do we have any speakers on this?
There are no speakers.
All right, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote then.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yep.
President Lenny.
Yes, that carries unanimously. Our second part of this item is to appoint a representative and an alternate. This is the point where I'm looking for volunteers, people who might be interested in this. Oh, I see one. Going once?
I would act as an alternate to John, if that's the will of the board.
Okay. Any other items? All right, well, so then I'll take that as a motion and a second as well to appoint Director Coleman as our primary representative and Director McIntosh as our alternate. Thank you for stepping up that way, and let's have a roll call vote.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
You bet.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, thank you. That was unanimous on item 12.2. 12.3 is the cost sharing agreement. And I will,
I'll make a motion in favor of that.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Motion by Director Young, second by Director McIntosh. Any comments? Further questions, discussion? All right, then we will have a roll call vote, please.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, that also carries unanimously. Mike and the rest of the staff who have prepared us so well on this subject from past briefings and everything else, I thank you. Made it easy today to back this.
Well done, guys.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Director Coleman, for sharing your thoughts on the importance of this project. So next up, just as a reminder, back in July, we presented the excessive use ordinance to the Planning Committee. And based on the committee's feedback, we made changes to the ordinance, which we presented to the full board on August 10th. Today is the first reading of the amendments to the excessive use ordinance, which incorporates the feedback that we heard from the board in August. These amendments are necessary to comply with state law and changes to our water shortage contingency plan that the board adopted back on June 22nd. One of the changes was to impose mandatory rationing when a stage 2 drought is declared. The other important amendment is to provide a warning for the first billing cycle exceeding the threshold rather than imposing a penalty. Alice Toohey, Manager of Water Conservation, will make the presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you, General Manager, Board President, and members of the board. So as the General Manager said, I'm just going to be giving you a quick update. A lot of these slides will look familiar to you, so we'll try to go through pretty quickly and then just hit on anything that's kind of changed. If I could get the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a reminder of the background, East Bay MUD's ordinance, which was originally enacted in April of 2015 during our last drought. It applies, as currently written, it applies during stage 3 in droughts to single family residential customers, which includes customers individually billed multifamily customers who have business classification code 8800. Since then, in 2016, there was a state bill that became law, SB 814, prohibiting excessive use for single family residential customers and requiring agencies like East Bay MUD to have a system to discourage excessive use during certain conditions. So the impetus for updating this ordinance is to comply with SB 814. Next slide, please. So as Clifford mentioned, we've had several discussions with you at the Planning Committee and at the full board meeting in August. And so this is where we kind of ended up in terms of the penalty thresholds currently. So stage 4 would not change from what's currently in the ordinance. It would be 40 CCF per month, which works out to be about 1,000 gallons per day. Stage 3 would lower slightly from originally was 60 CCF. Now we'd be taking it down to 59 CCF per month. And stage 2, after some various discussions with the board, we've landed at 66 CCF per month, which works out to be just over 1,600 gallons of water per day for single family residential customers. And again, just to remind the board, we did do a review of our 2020 billing data for single family residential customers. We also did some calculations looking at the amount of water that a family might expect to use, particularly if they're in eastern part of our service area where it's a lot warmer in the summer. kind of trying to get a sense of how much landscape area could be irrigated with, different amounts of water. Average single-family residential water use in 2020 was about 225 gallons per day. That went up to about 275 in the summer. But if you'll go to the next slide, please, Risha, that one other thing that I do really want to highlight for the board today is that, although we're talking about these different stages, we really, I think staff's perspective is we don't want anybody to be in violation of this ordinance. I mean, the goal is to discourage excessive use. So as part of that, we've been discussing how we would do outreach. So if the board were to activate this ordinance, like let's say next year we had to declare a stage 3 drought or a stage 2 drought, and we put the ordinance into effect, we activated it. We at that time would plan to do outreach to high users. And what we've discussed is that we would really want to cast a wide net. So we're not just reaching out to customers who are right at that threshold, but even customers who are using significantly less water than that, but are still using a lot. So we would notify those customers through letters or email if we have it available to let them know, hey, we're in a drought, you're a high water user, there's this ordinance going into effect, we wanted to let you know about it, and we wanted to let you know about some resources to help you bring your water down. So again, that first outreach to customers at the time that we activate the ordinance, we would be looking to kind of cast a broad net and really try to use that as a means for communicating with our high users to bring their water use down. If I could have the next slide, please. Now, along with that, as the general manager mentioned, one of the other changes that we wanted to make to this ordinance was to add a warning on the first exceedance during a drought cycle. Again, that's partially related to this issue that we ran into in 2015, where customers who are in violation of the ordinance are subject to Public Records Act requests. Now, customers can appeal the ordinance if they appeal their violation if they have a leak or a meter error. But we did see in 2015 that there were some customers who were sort of caught up in those public records requests because the appeal process takes time. So again, we're planning to do proactive outreach at the time that we activate the ordinance to a broad group of customers. And then if customers do have an exceedance, that first exceedance would not be a violation. They would have time to course correct and fix whatever problem they're having and bring their water use down before if they have another exceedance when it would actually be a violation. I also wanted to let you know that in terms of the penalty, the current ordinance sets the penalty at $2 per CCF when the customers exceed the threshold. So we're recommending that we would retain that penalty for stages 3 and 4 and impose a $2 per CCF penalty for any use above the threshold at that stage 2. And I just want to point out to the board that this is something that the board can amend the ordinance in the future or make changes to that particular provision in the future if you feel like you need to change that dollar amount. Could I have the next slide, please? So we do have an exception in an appeals process. We do make exceptions for leaks and meter errors. And the original language of the ordinance said health and safety. We're just changing the wording a little bit to say medical reasons to, again, make sure that we're in compliance with state law. The appeals process is that if a customer receives notification from us of an exceedance, excuse me, they have to submit their appeal within 15 days of receiving the water bill. We have 30 days to respond. Any denials can be appealed to the manager of customer and community services or his or her designee, and that decision is final. And then the customer would have 10 days to pay their fees after that second appeal is denied. Next slide, please. So just in terms of next steps, this is the first reading of the ordinance. If you have questions or feedback, particularly on the penalty fee, we'd really love to hear that now. Our goal is to bring the ordinance back to you for a second reading and potential adoption on September 28th. The requirements of the MUD Act, I believe, are then that we would post a summary of the ordinance publicly, and it would become effective 30 days later. But again, I just want to remind the board that the ordinance would be changed, it would be updated, it would be in effect, but it wouldn't actually be active. So the board would have to take some additional future step to activate the ordinance, like declaring a stage 2, 3, or 4 drought, or making a decision that there was a governor declared drought based on local conditions that affected us. And again, just to reiterate, we are going to be, anytime that we activate the ordinance, we are going to be thinking about doing a lot of proactive outreach to our customers to make sure that they know about this and have a chance to reduce their water use. And that's my quick presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions or feedback.
Any questions from board members?
If I could, this is John. Thank you, Alice, for the presentation. I am curious, when we talk about governor's orders, does that, I know in the last drought, when our customers did an exceedingly good job of saving water, the State Water Resources Control Board told us that we had to conserve more, even though we were in a different situation in other parts of the state. So if the State Water Resources Control Board or the governor dictates it, how much can they dictate that, for example, we go to a stage 2 drought or a stage 3 or 4? What flexibility do we have as an agency? I mean, I look at some of our neighboring agencies in their water situation. It's horrible. We're doing reasonably okay considering what we're faced with, but our customers have also done a good job for years conserving. So what legal authority do they have that dictates that we go to a stage 2, 3, or 4?
Yeah, that's a great question. I might take a quick crack at answering that and then see if our general counsel has any additional comments. I believe that the way the state law is written, it's not that the state would necessarily mandate that we move to a stage 2 or 3 or 4 drought, but the state might mandate that, hey, we're in a drought and we're requiring you, East Bay MUD, to have this ordinance in place or to have mandatory restrictions. So it is, the way that we are written the revised ordinance, it allows for that possibility that, we could be in a situation where we're in a stage 1 drought, or we don't think we're in a drought at all, but there's some kind of governor declaration that we have to respond to. And the way the ordinance is set up is that at that point, the board would take an action and you would decide what the threshold would be for that particular situation. So we could make a determination, based on our local conditions, and we might decide like, hey, we're in a stage 1 drought. We think it's fair to, set the threshold really high because, we don't feel that we, are in a situation where we're quite as concerned about it. Derek, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that.
And maybe Alice, I'll just quickly jump in. I think you captured a lot, but I mean, there's a lot of control of the local agency to declare a stage 2 or 3, 4 drought if we have the mandatory rationing where the excessive use ordinance would come into play. But the way the regulations are written too is the governor can declare under the California Emergency Services Act, emergency, drought emergency based on local conditions. And if he does that, then these conditions may also come into effect. Now, we certainly hope that he takes into account local conditions, but the way the regulations are written is such that he can do that, and our ordinance is being modified so that we can capture all those different scenarios.
So in that case, if the governor or the State Water Resources Control Board says that you are to have mandatory rationing at 15%, I'll say hypothetically, that would put us at a stage 3 the way we have it designed now, correct?
I believe so. I think I'd have to, I apologize, I don't have the drought management program guidelines in front of me, but I whether that's stage 2 or 3, but yes. And just a reminder also, as we always say, those guidelines are guidelines. The board can decide on how it wants to respond to those situations.
And okay, thank you very much for the clarification on that, Alice. I have a concern with the stage 2 when we're talking about a $2 per CCF, when we already have that for 3 and 4. I have less of an issue if it's $1, I guess. I mean, I'd rather we use the carrot than the stick in this approach, because our customers have over time done a phenomenal job whenever we ask to conserve water. And everybody knows that a lot of the higher water user penalties reside in my ward. And I just want people to understand that. And we talked about in the BD1 how we're going to take into account, I'm trying to find it right now, basically outside usage and everything else. I'm trying to find it right now as I'm looking at the BD1 here.
I think I know what you're talking about, sort of things like evapotranspiration.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I remember those.
But to me, it's not taking into account that with the stage 2 or 3, 4. I mean, 4 is a whole different ballgame. 3 is very severe. 2 is we're moving in that direction, but things could change. And I don't see. Can you explain to me how we're taking into account evapotranspiration and lot size or size of families to impact us going into stage 2?
Sure. I think the way that we were thinking about it as staff was we were trying to kind of consider, sort of an average kind of family, who lives east of hills, who lives in an area where it's really warm. How much land could they irrigate for, at the different stages, or how much, area could they irrigate for kind of a high evapotranspiration? And, our calculations showed that even if folks had a decent amount of turf, even at stage 4, even at that, 40 CCF, you could irrigate up to, I think it was 7,500 square feet of landscaping, which is a pretty good size lot. So we kind of felt comfortable that, and since stage 3 and stage 2 are an even higher amount of water, we sort of felt comfortable as staff that, for most people, that's a reasonable amount of use. Now, I do believe, and that we can, correct me if I'm wrong here, Derek, but to your comment on the penalty for stage 2, I believe we can set different penalties at the different stages. So if the board was interested in, say, having a $1 per CCF at stage 2 and then going up to $2 at stage 3 and stage 4, that is, I believe, something that we can do.
That's correct. The statute gives us a lot of flexibility to set penalties at different stages. It merely sets a ceiling at $500 per unit.
And just one question on that, Derek. If we made that, my understanding is, and I could be wrong here, if we decided to make a change like that between now and September, would we have to do a first reading again, or is that a change we could make and just go to the second reading?
So we would make changes based on the board's directives today, and then at the second reading, those changes, and assuming there are no other changes made to the ordinance, then it could be adopted.
Okay, thank you, Derek and Alice. The other thing I want to bring up, and I did have a chance to mention this to Clifford yesterday, I do not want to see us releasing the names of people who are in violation. I believe it's a violation of personal rights. And quite frankly, we do not release and have not released the names of those who are caught with water theft for personal right issues. And my fear is that we live in a different world than we did 5 years ago, 10, 20 years ago, where a lot of people have anger management issues, maybe is the best way to describe it, being gentle, that we're putting people's families in potential jeopardy. And I would like to have that we're included, that we would not be including the names and cities of people who are in that category. It's maybe different to say there's X number in certain community, but not to be releasing their names and communities which they live in.
I believe so a couple of things. I'm going to defer to Derek on this. I think that it's because it's I think it's a Public Records Act issue. I'm not sure if we have the legal authority to not release that information. But
well, we discussed this on the water theft issue a couple of years ago, and we were told we didn't have to. It's no different, and we haven't.
Yeah, I would defer to counsel on that.
So I'm not certain what legal advice was provided on the water theft issue, but the Public Records Act request does require us to release the names, utility usage data, and home addresses of anyone that the local agency determines has used utility services in a manner inconsistent with applicable local utility usage policies. So that's why we've amended the ordinance and changed the ordinance to make it clear that the determination that a violation of this ordinance is made once you have failed to correct after the first notice.
So if a customer has an exceedance, they get a warning, and they're not going to be subject to the public records request until they exceed again.
Well, again, my concern, and I don't care where a person lives, if a person's name and community or their address is listed, do we have are we putting ourselves in legal jeopardy if something were to happen as a result of that?
I don't believe we'd be in legal jeopardy for following a statutory directive. It's a mandate. Going back to your early question regarding disclosure of water theft, really depending on the nature of the record, I think a record of water theft may very well be disclosable under the Public Records Act. So.
And I don't think it should be either, quite frankly, because there's different circumstances why that may have happened. But I do think there's a public safety issue for those who are identified. And I said that last time, and I'll continue to harp on that. It's when so-and-so is listed and their city and address is listed, we're putting them in jeopardy by somebody who is off balance. That's maybe a nicer way to put it.
John, it's no different than when they do the Public Records Act on employee salaries. You know, I happen to think that employee salaries should be absolutely positively immune from being seen, but that's not what's been the ruling. So I think we're stuck.
What I can offer Director Coleman is that we will, I think we all are aware of that issue. And, that's part of why we're planning this really proactive outreach and having the warning and doing outreach to those customers to try to, prevent folks from even getting to that point.
Okay, I'll see how it develops. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Andy, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do have some concerns about the drafting of the warning provision. As I mentioned at our last meeting, I'm concerned about this ordinance becoming really just window dressing if we're providing a very broad get out of jail free card. And I want to see this ordinance really have an effect on being able to respond to a drought emergency. And I'm also in support of having a warning program so that we really are communicating with our customers about the way to reduce water and getting our customers to cooperate with our community in making sure that we have adequate water supplies for the future. But what this current drafting does, and I'm looking at page 92 of our document, it's on page 10 of the draft ordinance, section F2A. That's where I'm looking right now. What I'm seeing here is, first, if you have your first billing cycle that doesn't really get into the exceedance territory, and then you're not really covered because you're not violating the ordinance. But let's say you have a very high exceedance in the middle of the summer, that's your warning. You're off. And then we have a 2-month billing cycle. There really isn't a lot of room for error here. So what I proposed at the last board meeting and what I thought would be feasible for a drafted version of this ordinance would be a preemptive warning where we are communicating with our customers proactively to provide that affirmative notice while we're declaring the drought. So after we declare the drought, the notice goes out, and then a customer is on notice. And then the first billing cycle after that notice, a customer would be aware. This ordinance does declare that its existence provides legal notice, but at least for the warning provision, I think it would be very feasible to say the first billing cycle that begins after our voluntary warning goes out, that there would be liability under this ordinance. So that's what I think would be more effective, because otherwise we're really just erasing the effectiveness of this penalty program. So that's I have some drafting proposals that would give effect to that, but that's the major problem that I find with this drafting of this ordinance.
And you're saying that a notice would go out to customers who, if the exceedance ordinance was in place, they would be violating it, and just to kind of warning, hey, you know, you need to cut back on your water as we put in this ordinance. You know, this ordinance went into effect. It's not going to, maybe again, I just want to be clear. I mean, it sounds like you have an idea there that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's a way to have a compromise between the concept of having a warning so that our customers who could be subject to this penalty are aware before they get into that situation, but not to just erase 2 months of violation in a 3.5 month summer period. So I think we can have both, and but the current drafting doesn't do that. The threshold for the notification, I think, is an important issue for staff to come back with. My understanding is that staff could be interested in sending out notices to customers with a billing history that's somewhat below the threshold, so that customers who customers who aren't at the bare minimum of the stage 2 threshold would receive notice, so that somebody who is at the edge would have some warning, just in case they get a leak that bumps them into that category. So I don't know technically what the right number is for that notification, but I feel like that's very feasible to determine. And I can provide the drafting suggestions, but I also would defer to district council about whether those suggestions are the right suggestions, or if we should postpone it to the next meeting or take a break. But I wanted to get that problem out there so that we can understand our options.
Maybe we could get some feedback from staff.
Yeah, I don't know, Clifford or Derek, if I can speak, or Clifford, you look like you might be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things just on the timing, of it. If we got the language outside of this discussion, the rest of the board won't have an opportunity to see it, and it's going to extend how long it will take to get the ordinance approved. But I think more fundamentally, our goal when we had the discussion with the board was to, see how we can provide as much notice as possible. But again, as Alice described, really cast that broad net to capture people who aren't right at the threshold of a stage 2, 3, or 4, but much lower. Just to, again, remembering our ultimate goal is to get people to not waste water, but as well as achieve whatever target that we set in a particular drought. And balance that with the fact that, we don't want to unnecessarily penalize and put people at risk of public disclosure who might have had leaks or other things that were out of their control because of the 2 month billing cycle. And so we felt that this was a good balance between achieving our goals, overall goals of not having people waste water by sending out that preemptive, very broad notice, as well as achieving the goal of having people not use water excessively. That's the balance we were trying to strike with all these amendments.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate what Clifford said, I think is really important, is we could have somebody who, their water use is low enough that they don't get that initial notification when we activate the ordinance. They don't really even know about it, and then they have some kind of a leak that goes on for the better part of 2 months, and suddenly they're in violation of the ordinance and potentially subject to public records requests. So I think that's why we as staff really thought it was important to keep that warning on the first exceedance. And I see, I see Director Young's hand is up as well.
Did Derek have something he wanted to add on this before I ask my question?
No, I mean, I think the only legal issue is the procedure for the readings. So if major changes were made to this ordinance today, and then that was the subject of further discussion at the next reading, then we'd probably need a third reading. But again, these are policy decisions. So
there's not a problem. I mean, am I forgetting that there's a problem with taking the time that we need to do it right?
As a matter of law, no. I think it's more of a matter of timing. So.
Right, but we're not gonna. It seems to me like we have time. We have a little bit of time on our side anyway.
Yeah, and maybe, sorry, Director Young, before. I mean, we have to look at the timing. We may not have an ordinance in effect, if the governor declares, a local drought based on local emergency. Our ordinance currently doesn't capture that. So if you just look at the timing of when we have to do the second reading and the amount of time it takes to get into effect. So right now, there's no urgency, as you noted, but again, we don't know what might happen in the next month if the governor makes any sort of declaration.
Seems to me that he'll wait to see if it starts raining or not. But the thing that the question that I have for Alice really is that it seems to me that we have a deep well of data to understand, pretty much who those customers are now. I mean, aside from the person that ends up with a leak that, goes undetected for 2 months. I mean, we know who those customers are. And if, you're proposing a pretty proactive approach to advise those customers. And what I remember from the last drought was there were a lot of names of people that really don't pay their water bills and don't pay attention. So the thing I would add is that, and this isn't about the ordinance so much as how you, sort of go about sort of casting that net is, how it does get to the decider who's going to, change the practices, right? The accountant is going to tell the landscape person, hey, cool it, whatever they need to do. It's like, we're not going to plant grapes this year or whatever. Got to roll back on the koi pond a little bit or whatever the things are that use copious amounts of water. So that in effect, that notification is more like a warning. I guess my second level question is, I mean, from what Andy said, it seems like if I'm misinterpreting what you said, Andy, I apologize. But I mean, is the water use pattern for people that get the penalty and got the penalty last time? Again, thinking about this deep well of data, if you were to model, what's the period of time when, these exceedances happen? Is it really just a billing cycle, or is it, more than one? And how many repeaters did we have, repeat offenders did we have, cycle to cycle? And some of those things could help you further fine tune, how to go about it. I want the behavior change to happen. I want the tail to get chopped off. I want it to stay chopped off. I don't know that tail of, excessive use that is still there, clearly, that it does get pulled back as far as it can in whatever we do and however we enact this ordinance. So I don't have a problem with the warning as long as the sort of the pre-work we're doing is saying, this is a big deal. You need to be very aware of what you're doing in your next, now that this ordinance is in effect, and then to, hit them hard the second time. On the, $1 a unit versus $2 a unit, changing it for stage 2. I'd rather have people feel it early and make the change, and not have the charge again, rather than say, it's not this serious this time, but we're going to double it in the next one, because I want to chop the tail off. Earlier the better.
And one thing I can say to that, when we were, that might be interesting to the board is, when we were looking at the historic data, like, for example, we were looking at customer, how many customers would be affected by the 40 CCF threshold, right? We kind of looked back historically, and the number of customers that was affected was significantly lower in 2015. So that says to me that, and I saw that looking back at the, the drought lessons learned report and some of the other documentation from 2015, 2016, that it did seem like the ordinance did have that effect of decreasing excessive water use, that those customers that, normally might use a lot of water got the message and decreased their water use. I believe there were some repeat offenders. There were also, as I recall, several thousand appeals that were filed. So just for a sense of how it played out. But yeah, I think, we would want to think about how when we do that initial outreach to those customers, and like Clifford said, we'd be casting a wide net. If it's stage 4, we might be notifying customers who use 500 gallons a day or more, rather than 1,000, right? We really want to reach out. And we can think about how we craft that letter in a way that it sort of gets attention. And
I'd even think about sending a certified letter to anybody that got the penalty last time around.
Yeah.
Make it so that somebody actually has to pay attention to it. They can't, they can't ignore it. It's not that expensive. And in the scheme of things, so that it really is not just something that comes in the mail that gets discarded.
Are there other comments or questions?
We have one public comment.
Oh, okay.
It's
George.
me again.
Yes.
Yeah, it's me again. Sorry. I'm approaching this from the perspective of an employee now, so my third role. I wasn't quite clear. So say, for example, someone has a house line leak and the only way they find out about it is from their bill, which happened to me as a customer. So is it at that point when they get their bill, say they normally use 10 units of water and they get their bill and it's 364 units of water? Is it at that point that they get the warning, or is it at that point they get the penalty?
Yeah, so I think, George, that's what we're trying to determine. The way the ordinance is currently written, there's no warning. If you were that, like in 2015, if you had that house line leak, you would get your water bill and it would say, you've used 360 units of water, you were in violation of the excessive use ordinance, here is your penalty, here's how to appeal it. And you could submit an appeal, but that, would take a few weeks to work its way through the process. I think what the board is discussing now is whether we want to add a warning at the first exceedance. So in that situation, if you had that leak, you would get the water bill and it would say, hey, just FYI, you're exceeding the threshold for the excessive use ordinance. If this happens again, you're going to be in violation. And at that point, you would have a chance to fix the leak and hopefully correct the issue, before the next billing cycle. Does help?
That answers it, because when you have that, the excess usage is going to continue into the next bill because you have to get it fixed, and it might take a little while, and it's costly. When my house line broke, I had to pay $1,200 to have it fixed, and I could do it, but there are some of our customers who might struggle with that. So that's encouraging, because the nightmare scenario would have been the customer in Director Coleman's ward a couple of years ago, who had the largest single-family dwelling bi-monthly bill I've ever seen in my 26 years at East Bay MUD. It was ridiculous because of a leak. And so if that penalty had been applied at that time, fortunately it wasn't a drought, it would have added, I'm going to say somewhere about like $20,000 to the customer's bill. It was crazy. My second thing is, in the presentation, you mentioned, you showed the slide of the appeals process, and it says if the second appeal is denied, the customer has 10 days to pay. What if they don't pay? What happens then?
That's a good question. I don't know, Derek, if you want to speak to that.
Sure, I can, but it looks like Andrew also has something to.
Oh, I see. Andrew. Yeah, I'm going to defer to Andrew on what we would do. I mean, because it's, we have all sorts of processes for non-payment. I'm not sure for the penalty.
Good afternoon. My answer should be short. We're just going to go through the entire delinquent process. So it would just follow the collection process as per normal.
That makes sense. Thank you, Andrew. Didn't see you there. How are you?
They'd ultimately end up with a lien on the property if they were a homeowner and continued not to pay. Correct?
Based on the no shut-off policy, that would be the case.
Yeah. Or they get a flow restrictor first.
Yeah, that would be a concern, especially if someone who's been a loyal customer for 25, 30 years, paid their bills on time, then had the house line leak that went into the second billing period and they couldn't pay it timely. You know, I'm not sure that that's necessarily the most appropriate approach.
That's not our approach, though.
Yeah,
That's not our approach.
Yeah, and just to be clear, George, if the customer has a leak and it, you know, takes them a while, it's a huge leak, it takes them a while to fix it, and they get into that second billing cycle, they can still, you know, they can let us know and file an appeal. And as soon as they provide us evidence that they fixed the leak, you know, they're off the hook.
Okay.
So yeah, we would, you know, and I think we can think about how we do the messaging around that, you know, that like, hey, customer, you know, you're in exceedance of this threshold. If you have a leak and you're working on fixing it, you know, please get in touch with us ASAP so we can, you know, make sure you're squared away.
Right. The reason I'm asking these questions as an employee is my group is part of customer and community services. And as you know,
Sure.
Allison, with
Oh, yeah.
those. And our group is responsible for billing and programming the rates and things like that. So these things come up to us and people ask us these questions. So,
and I have, you know, we have had some conversations with Terry Dean Ellerson, your manager, about this, and I'm, you know, sure we'll be talking about it more. So thank you for your input, George.
Other comments, questions?
George's second question did prompt me to just want to clarify. So does the leak correction, so let's say a customer applies to the district for a correction in their bill, you know, not even in the context of the penalty, but we do provide a bill adjustment for their consumption. Does this ordinance, as it's currently drafted, will that leak adjustment also apply to reduce what consumption we apply towards the penalty amount? Is that the way we're taking that into account, or is that through the appeal?
I think it would be through the appeal. You would file an appeal, and you know, and then separately probably seek a leak adjustment. Yeah, so the appeal would take care of any charges, you know, for the excessive, you know, use penalty, and then you could do the process of requesting a leak adjustment for your just, you know, kind of normal water bill.
It sounds like that aspect is drafted appropriately, but it might make sense for us to facilitate that if we have a record of a customer subject to the penalty who has also had a leak report. Do we have a way to connect those dots together and automatically process some kind of appeal or provide some additional notification to make that easier?
I don't know about automatically granting the appeal, but we could, you know, I talked to Andrew and other staff about this. We could look at if there's a way to monitor and, you know, reach out to those customers, because I think it, you know, I don't think it would be very many who, you know, would go through the leak resolution process without submitting the appeal. But we could look for a way to monitor that and, you know, just do targeted outreach to those specific customers to kind of let them know. That's how Andrew, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on.
Yeah, I do want to add that because we do rely on a meter data first before we can make those decisions. So there is essentially a 2-month waiting period before the data turns up, so we can look at, you know, what the customer consumptions are. And then for the leak resolution, the adjustment policy that we do, you know, require the customer to submit that there's proof that they've done the repairs, because we just, you know, we don't know if it's a leak or is it just really that much water that's being used, you know, during the 2-month period. So part of it is that we are relying on the customer to provide us proof of evidence of a leak that was repaired.
Thanks. I have another question related to the definition of the first exceedance during the drought cycle for the purposes of the warning. So how do we define the drought cycle in this context? Is it the water year and the current stage declaration of one water year, or in a multi-year drought, is the drought cycle continuous, where a customer who has exceeded already once during coverage of this ordinance under a stage 2 declaration. We go into another year that might have the same stage or a higher stage. It does appear to me that in no event under the current drafting would a customer be subjected to the thresholds of a higher stage until this provision operates for a full billing cycle after that higher stage. But at least for what's happening, in the current stage, do we have to go through another water year and they get another 2 months, or will does a multi-year drought count as the same drought cycle?
A multi-year drought would count as the same drought cycle. So just as an example, let's say we're in a stage 2 drought, somebody has an exceedance, they get a warning. Next year we say, oh, hey, his conditions are worse. We're now in a stage 3 drought. That person has another exceedance. That would be their second exceedance. So they would be in violation at that point.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like it's the appropriate way to handle it. So I still remain concerned about the delayed application, and it would it's important to provide that notification to customers, but we don't need to delay the application of the penalty because we have the ability to actually provide a proactive warning. We know who the customers are likely to be. We don't have to subject the penalty to people who never got that warning if we guessed wrong. We're not guessing, we have actual historical customer data, but if we leave a customer out of that group, we certainly can make sure that this warning period is provided to anybody who doesn't get that proactive warning. So my proposal would be to add a second trigger in that warning paragraph. So it would be either that first instance, through the billing cycle, or create a subparagraph B, the first billing cycle beginning after receipt of a warning notification, whichever occurs first. So that would be my proposal to be able to still make sure that this ordinance really has effect.
So what you're proposing is, when we activate the ordinance, we would send a warning to, all the customers who we think are using a high amount of water. So then if the ordinance is activated, those customers, if they have another exceedance, they would then be in violation, but somebody who didn't get that initial warning would get a warning. I'm not sure, in terms of our billing system, I don't know, Andrew, if you can speak to whether we could accommodate that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we're going to be able to accommodate that, but I think I hear what Director Cat is saying. So essentially that you want to be able to notify those high user in advance of us activate an ordinance.
I guess my other concern with that is just that, it's, I could see a customer saying, hey, I didn't know that, that there was no ordinance in effect when I was using this much water. So, why am I being penalized when I wasn't in because the ordinance wasn't in effect, I didn't have a chance to bring my water down. So I guess that would be my concern.
Oh, that wouldn't happen because they would have gotten the warning and had notice in advance of being in a period of time subject to a potential penalty.
Well, but then they're losing, I guess what I'm saying is, if I get this notification that says, okay, this excessive use ordinance is going into effect, I'm going to, I'm a good customer, I'm going to be responsive, I'm going to lower my water use, and then I have a leak or something later on, or it just, I guess it's just some concerns for me in terms of sort of fairness and who's getting the notice and who doesn't. Because, when they're getting the notice, that's for a period where the ordinance is not yet in effect. So I guess I just worry that it's a little unfair to give a notice for water use that's during a period where the ordinance wasn't in effect, but I may just be misunderstanding.
Oh, well, I think we would be providing that notice. First, I'm not suggesting that the warning be prescribed in the ordinance. I think that would be the trigger would be in the ordinance, that there would be board and staff discretion about exactly how to carry out that aspect of the warning. But it sounds like the appropriate time to do that warning would be around the March or April timeframe, particularly, accompanying our water deficiency declaration in April.
Well, but again, so you're talking about doing a warning for a period based on customer usage. I guess my concern is it's one thing to do sort of proactive outreach and say to people, hey, FYI, we noticed you're a high user. There's this, ordinance going into effect. I guess my concern is if the person's official warning is based on a period of time when the ordinance wasn't in effect, it kind of, I'm just a little concerned about doing that.
Well, so we're able to capture the history. So for people, we can look at the customer history from last summer, the summer before that. And I leave it to staff whether it would be the best method is to look at a group of, in 2 out of 3 years, these are the customers who had usage that exceeded this threshold. And that we're able to identify this group of customers that would benefit from an early notification of the existence of this ordinance. And I think we can provide that notification so that we can get ready for the summer when we have a serious drought.
So Alice, maybe let me just jump in to try to help possibly move this along in one fashion or another. So, what we're talking about is, do we provide, as far as what the penalty when it kicks in, is it going to be after the first exceedance or the second? What we're recommending from staff's perspective and looking at ultimately our goal, which is, I think, the same as, Director Katz and Director Young and others have been talking about, is we don't want people to use water excessively. And we believe that, the best approach and balance is to do that proactive outreach. And what we heard from Director Young is, and even those who may have exceeded the last time, send a more strongly worded message, certified mail, which we could do, to really, not get people to have excessive use, but balance that with getting other people get caught up in that first exceedance and having being subject to a penalty and a Public Records Act request. We think we can accomplish this with what we're proposing, where we have, the first, sending out that broad-based notice with the suggestion that Director Young has. We can send out some even more strongly worded messages for people who have exceeded in the past or had high uses in the past. Then we have the second, then if they exceed it, that would be their warning. And then the second time would be when they actually get penalized. And we really believe that we can accomplish that goal by doing that. What we're trying to accomplish is not have excessive users while not also creating other problems for our customers and publicly shaming them in that manner where they didn't have an opportunity to correct what got them there in the first place. And we think that with that proactive outreach, with some strongly worded messaging that the board is suggesting right now, and what we're proposing in the ordinance can accomplish that. We could do also what we did back in 2015, which is but we're trying to balance that, and we think this is the better approach. That's, I think, the most important issue that we're trying to resolve right now. The second one, of course, is what's that penalty, at stage 2, 3, and 4. But I just like to kind of get from the board, are you comfortable with staff's recommendation that we can reduce the number of excessive users with this approach of proactive outreach, strongly worded messaging, but providing a warning for people, as we suggest in our amendment, or just having people get that warning the first time.
So there's a proactive message. It's a matter of timing, really, right? Our goals are all the same. The question is, how much notice does somebody need? And if the penalty doesn't kick in until 6 months down the line because of our billing cycle, then that's problematic. And if I'm doing the math wrong on that, then help me understand.
So I think what will happen is, if we declare mandatory rationing, then we would do that proactive messaging immediately. Then people will be in either at the beginning, the middle, or end of some sort of billing cycle that they're in. And the worst case situation, that would be 2 months, will pass before they realize that they've exceeded that threshold. That would be their warning. Then they would presumably, hopefully they got 2 messages now, they would cut back their water use to not be exceeding the water use. Then at the next cycle, hopefully most of the people have corrected the problem. And then there will be much fewer people who, by the time you get to the second billing cycle, who said, we're going to ignore East Bay MUD's first message, we're going to ignore the bill that showed that I use a lot of water, and then they will be hit with that penalty. And again, we believe that this is the right balance of an approach between getting people to stop using water, and there's some good suggestions here about sending out additional messages and strongly worded messages. But I think the timing is still not. We're not talking 6 months. We're talking anywhere between in some scenarios maybe as little as 2 months to up to 4 months. I mean, you're looking at that range where people will get some sort of notice, depending on where they are in their particular billing cycle.
I'm comfortable with your approach. Excuse me. I like some of Andy's comments, and I'm sort of looking for a balanced approach in all of this. But Clifford, I'm comfortable with staff's approach as you just laid out for us repeatedly.
If I can respond to some of what I've heard so far, I do remain concerned. I think if we were headed into the 3rd or 4th year of a serious drought, I would consider this a big step back from our ordinance. If we were to get hit with an extremely sudden drought that of great severity, with a weak water supply that was just above the drought threshold, I would also have a concern about this ordinance's effectiveness. I think in the current context, we already have a stage 2 drought in declaration. If we go into the 2nd year, we will have this ordinance already in effect, and we will know. I think the premise of this is that we have a lot of customers who during the summer months are continuously at this level of use, which as Director Young commented, we want to deal with. We want to reduce the number of customers that are excessively using during a drought, and that I think remains a concern that we need to be monitoring. If we do pass this ordinance today, I think we need to be making sure that this wasn't a step back and that we are doing something about this in an effective way. I think for a customer who doesn't necessarily come above that threshold, if they're in the April-May threshold, the April-May cycle, goes through the June-July, and then by August-September, it's either over or really too late to make a difference. So I think that that's still a plausible concern, and this it needs to be under continuing review. Given that we're in the middle of a drought, and this has been a moderate drought, this is something that we can reasonably debate. But I hope that we can work together to improve this before a more severe drought occurs.
We're actually in a stage 1 right now, Andy, not 2.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I am expressing these comments as if we're preparing for the possibility of a stage 2 or higher.
Okay.
All right. So Andy, are you saying continuing work, but nothing that you need right now that you want to see changed in this reading of the ordinance?
Well, you know, I mean, I would prefer that we work and fix it so that we don't have to continue with this task. But, you know, we're hearing from staff that they want to move forward with a plan. And I'm also listening to colleagues and not seeing, you know, similar echoes from enough board members. So I think I appreciate the other board members who have agreed that this is something of interest. And I hope that means that we can continue to look at this and see how we can improve it.
All right, then, if there's, I'm in agreement with you, Andy. I mean, I do think, Clifford, your explanation in terms of timeline maybe clarified for me sufficiently that I'm satisfied that, you know, the 2 to 4 month period, and it could be as little as 2 months before they get that letter of enforcement, that takes care of my concerns for the time being. But again, I also think that anything we can do to make sure that it's taken seriously, and again, exploring the option of certified letter or something that gives them, you know, a real strong notice that, you know, that they need to change their ways in some sufficient way would be great.
Yeah, and we can definitely move forward with that type of messaging and the certified mail. And then the only other topic I just want to make sure we're clear on, I know Director Coleman had suggested a lower threshold dollar amount for stage 2. We're recommending $2, and you know, if feedback from the rest of the board, if you want to stick it with $2 or have a lower threshold, or I think Director Young had suggested maybe even higher at the very beginning to really, you know, cut off the.
I wasn't suggesting higher.
Oh, sorry. I the very strongly worded "cut the tail off" was so.
Yeah.
No, cut the tail off, leave it at 2 on the first, you know, let's stop. But, you know, the people that are going to get penalized at stage 4 are also getting penalized at stage 2, right? So
Right, yes.
Make them feel the pain earlier, and then they won't feel it later, ideally.
I just need a quick clarification before we vote on this. So the letter of certification that we're talking about sending, which I think is a good idea, actually, when is that going to be going out? Does that constitute, if it goes out, let's say in a month, for we are going to a stage 2, does that constitute a notice of potential violation?
No. I think what we're talking about is, you know, if we activate the ordinance, you know, we talk about broad outreach. So I think, you know, we would still do that broad outreach, but I think what Director Young is suggesting is that for a subset of those customers, the folks who maybe had a violation last time, and Director Katz was suggesting, we do some data mining, we come up with our subset of like, ooh, these are the people who are really at risk. We're going to send them a certified letter to make sure that they actually, you know, get it and pay attention to it. And then maybe for other customers who are not quite as, you know, who are a little further away from the threshold, maybe it's just a regular letter or an email or something like that.
I just wanted to make sure that that letter is not constituting at this point in time a notice of violation and counting it towards the process.
That is not what we're suggesting. Correct. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So just given the feedback that I heard, you know, we'll keep the dollar penalty at $2 for stage 2, 3, and 4, and the amendments as we discussed. And then the outreach portion will strengthen based on the feedback that we got from the board.
All right, thank you. So let's.
No votes necessary.
Motion. No votes necessary.
This is just a first reading.
Right. All right. I'll just, for the record, you know, say I agree with John in terms of, you know, I don't believe there's a need for a public shaming, if you will, on this. But I do understand that's the law. There's nothing we can do about that. That's the way it was done. So, but I agree with you, John.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Alex.
We're on.
Thank you, everyone.
So,
thank you, Alex.
Next, we have the coronavirus update. And Dave Briggs, Director of Operations Maintenance, will talk about our very busy time right now to implement the various parts of the vaccination policy. And we'll also update you on the latest numbers, both at the district and county level.
Okay, thank you, Clifford. Good afternoon, President Linney and members of the board.
And thank you, Risha, for queuing this up. Robin, thank you, Robin. Slide 2 shows the positive cases in Alameda and Contra Costa County. They're trending downward. This is a similar shape to statewide positive cases. Most of the urban counties in the state of California are shaped this way. And typically the district's own positive rate is also highly correlated with Alameda County and Contra Costa County. We aren't seeing a drop yet. At the district, we still have a high infection rate. I'll get to that in a moment. But based on the fact that Labor Day weekend is getting into the rearview mirror at this point, and we do have a high correlation with Alameda County, I would expect that our rates will drop. But that's really a statistical argument and not necessarily a deterministic one. But maybe it's an optimistic one. So slide 3, we're showing the vaccination rates, and Alameda County, Contra Costa County, state of California, all the numbers shown here in the last 3 rows are about 3% higher than last time we showed you at the last board meeting in the end of August. The district's rate is the same, and before there's too much despair on that, just wanted to note that we know that anecdotally many district employees are getting vaccinated and they've had their first dose and they're on their way. I would also mention that being fully vaccinated at the district it has a different meaning now. One must provide the documentation to our HR people for that whole process to be verified for an employee to be considered to be fully vaccinated, whereas in the past that was simply a matter of self-attestation. So it's a bit more involved for the employee and our HR staff, and there's a backlog, but I expect our numbers to start inching upward as well. And then lastly, with the district's policy being discussed over the last month or so, and the vaccination requirements, that of course will increase the numbers as well. So looking at our positive count here, just heard about an hour ago of another one. So we are now at 136 for the pandemic over the last 18 months, 22 contractor positives. And as the slide is showing, 54%, a little over half of our cases over the past month have involved vaccinated staff. Most of those people are all experiencing mild symptoms, however. And about 45 people, again, this number changes on a daily basis, but about 45 people are being quarantined. Most of those are unvaccinated and they are not at work. You can see from the graphic below that our rate was very, very low in May and June. And beginning with the end of April and all the way to the first week of July, we were averaging essentially 1 or 2 a month. And then 1 week after the July 4th holiday, we entered into a period where we're averaging about 5 per week, and we're still seeing that. So as for the vaccination policy, we began testing our unvaccinated staff yesterday. That will continue throughout the week. Supervisors have some flexibility to test their staff depending on when it's most convenient for them and staff. And that testing is performed on district time and district cost. The testing applies to all unvaccinated employees. So even if you're telecommuting, if you come to the district on some kind of regular or irregular basis, you would still be required to test. And so we can keep the work environment as safe as possible. The vaccination requirement takes effect November 1st, 2021, and exemptions are going to be granted for legitimate medical and religious reasons. After November 1st, exempted employees will continue testing on district time and district cost. So after September 30th, there's less leave available. Through September 30th, employees have leave afforded to them through state law, SB 95. After September 30th, there is no state or federal leave at this moment. I'll come back to that. But after September 30th, the only leave that would be available at this point would be district-provided leave that would be limited to those staff who are vaccinated or exempted and quarantined due to a close contact at the district, at work. We would extend that leave for that circumstance. And also, if employees are feeling ill after their first or second dose of the vaccine,
or if they need time off to get vaccinated, they would also be able to use district time in that case as well. And just the mentioning, I'm sure the board is aware that the Biden administration last week began talking about additional leave that may be coming from the federal side. That has not been promulgated into a federal OSHA standard yet, or put into an explicit executive order yet, but the federal government is motioning that some leave may be provided at the federal level for feeling ill after vaccination and time off to receive a vaccine. As Clifford mentioned, we are very busy moving forward with the policy, very active meet and confer with the unions. Several weeks ago, the first item we focused on was providing a platform, a way for district staff to submit their documentation on proof of vaccination electronically, and for our HR staff to process it and make a database. So that's been done. We have about 1,400 employees have already utilized that so far. We kicked off the testing program this week, which involved a lot of logistics. So I'm sure things aren't going perfectly this week, but we will refine that process as we go forward. Probably 400 to 500 employees are a part of this testing at this point. Our HR staff distributed the forms necessary if one is interested in applying for an exemption. That was distributed, I believe, on September 2nd. So that's been done. We are continuing to work with our IT people on maintaining confidentiality of employee personal data. So that's ongoing. And outreach is also ongoing. We have all of the information on the splash pad on the district server, one-stop shopping. So a lot of information is available there, and it's easy to find. And additionally, we are hosting a webinar from a medical expert, Dr. George Rutherford, who is an epidemiologist from UCSF. He will be virtually here on October 5th in the afternoon to answer medical questions and vaccination questions from our employees. And we're happy to host him, a very personable person, and I think very able to answer many questions from staff. We are actively negotiating change orders with our contractors to add vaccine requirements and testing requirements to those contracts, and so that they will, when they are on our work sites, that they operate under the same rules that we do. And lastly, we have an extensive frequently asked questions document that we've been working on that I think we're going to try to release that on Wednesday tomorrow for employees' benefit. And then the last slide I have, just to review the contracts that were authorized under the emergency declaration last January. These contracts are both limited to $500,000 in authorization. They were authorized in January. There's two. One is for Axiom. They are the company that are handling our contact tracing. We are getting right now, and for the past several weeks or so, we can get about 50 to 60 phone calls a day. Not all of those are positives, obviously, but there's a lot of questions from employees, a lot of contact tracing phone calls, a lot of employees calling with symptoms, and it adds up to, as I said, 50 to 60 calls a day. So this is the company that is helping us with all of that effort. We initially authorized them for $50,000 back in January, and we are increasing that to $220,000, still under the $500,000. Our testing kits to support our testing program is done through WorkCare, and we have increased that authorization to the $500,000 limit. And we will be likely coming back in the second meeting in September or the first meeting in October to request an additional authorization for WorkCare to obtain additional kits to finish our testing program through the 1st of November. And that's what I have for you today.
We have one public comment.
Rachel Varao, you should be able to, you unmuted your mic. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I was wanted to address a couple of things, and I wrote a letter to request informed consent from the board and HR this morning. The first response I received was in regards to a conflict of interest, and the
East Bay MUD is supposed to provide any potential conflicts of interest, including public and personal. I was referred to look at the Form 700, which is public records. So I was wondering, how would I access the personal? And then I also need to know Form 700, when that's filed by East Bay MUD or the board, is it filed under East Bay MUD's name, or is it filed under individual board members' names? And then also I was directed on another question when I asked in regards to the virus being transmitted from vaccinated people, and I was directed to a CDC website. And on the CDC website, it does say that people who are vaccinated and still get infected, there is a risk of transmissions to others. So it seems as if those who are unvaccinated are being singled out and being made to test, even though the possibility of transmission exists in vaccinated and unvaccinated employees. So unvaccinated employees pose just as much risk as vaccinated employees pose just as much risk as an unvaccinated employee. So I was hoping that maybe you could consider vaccinating all of the staff, since vaccinated or unvaccinated pose a risk of transmission of getting the virus and transmitting it. And then I think I have one more thing. And then I guess, oh, and I also wanted to address that a couple months ago, our union called a meeting because during the benefits audit for our dependents, I received an email from my supervisors in regards to that, specifically stating what dependents and their relationship to me and the information I needed. And that reason they called that meeting was because they felt that that was not keeping our private information confidential. And this is actually medical record. And I received an email from my supervisors as well in regards to my vaccination status. It said that I was identified as somebody who needed to do the testing. And so being that my medical information is being given to supervisors, and as I understand from other departments, their superintendents, I mean, I thought these things were supposed to be handled by HR. I really don't want somebody working closely to me, really knowing what my personal information is. So those are my concerns.
All right.
Clifford, do you want to address some of the comments?
Yeah, so for the broader email that Rachel is talking about, the Human Resources Department responded, and it sounds like she has some additional questions, which we can get back to you, Rachel, if you want to reach out to the Human Resources Department. As far as who knows about your vaccination status, the logistics of getting the test kits out to the various staff falls on the supervisor, and the supervisors need to know who needs to be tested. The other piece before that, you talked about, can vaccinated people transmit the disease? That is true. Vaccinated people can have breakthrough cases. We do know from the CDC that it's only if you're vaccinated, you're much less likely to have a breakthrough case than if you're unvaccinated. We also know that the vaccinated people carry that virus load for a much shorter period of time than if you're unvaccinated. And so our plan for testing is a balance between the logistics of testing everyone versus who is most likely to be infected with the disease.
Okay, I didn't read where they carried it for a shorter period of time, but it is still transmittable. They still can catch it, and it is still transmittable. So it does seem like people are being singled out because they're unvaccinated, and when everybody can still transmit it. So, I mean, it doesn't seem fair that you're only going to test the unvaccinated people for that, because they can transmit it just as well. And
So we'll be happy to share all that information with you, Rachel, and I can speak with you if you'd like after as well on this.
Okay, I would appreciate that because I haven't received. I sent emails to the board, and this is the first response I've gotten. So I would appreciate any type of dialogue that we can get in regards to this.
All right, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Any other updates?
I'm sorry, we have one additional
Okay.
speaker we have another speaker for public comment. Hold on. That is Casey Evans. You should be able to unmute your mic.
Thank you so much, Risha. Again, I wanted to come and speak to the board and the general manager about my opposition of being treated like property. I also want to bring some clarification to the matter. So I've already voiced this about the abuse of the absolute power of the board.
Casey, you got cut off. Casey, we can't hear you if you're still
Taking away
speaking.
privacy. The district has been caught more than. Hear me now, Risha?
You're going in and out, so I don't know if you're on a headset.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you better, yes. Go. Now we can't hear you. Casey, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
So I wanted to say.
Casey, we're still having trouble hearing you.
Employee, every board member, every internet. I'm sorry?
We can't hear anything that you're saying. You're going in and out, and so we're only catching maybe 4 or 5 words at a time.
Yet employees are being asked for the district, and I do find that inappropriate and an abuse of the board member's power. You do. Asking someone to consent away, asking them to sign that their job depends on it is not true. And just to close up, there has not been an appropriate.
Casey, we have not been able to.
There has not been any true effort to meet and confer, at least with 2019. Count your blessings, Risha. I'll write something in.
Okay, so yeah, we were not able to hear you. So we'll look
We did
for.
hear you loud and clearly this morning, though, at our other public comment session.
Yes.
And would welcome any written comment.
I have another speaker for public comment.
All right, go ahead.
Gary Walters, you should be able to unmute your mic. Your
Thank
3
you,
minutes
Risha.
will start now.
Hello, President Linney, Board of Directors, GM, and others in attendance, we'll just say. I just wanted to echo some things I heard earlier. There seems to be this, vision of the vaccine being the holy grail. I was trained in how to respond to a pandemic in 2014 in order to support my local hospital in the event of a pandemic. I didn't even know what one was. The vaccine is not the answer to cure all. If it was, we wouldn't have to wear masks, is the line I love to use. Something I heard earlier, I think it was a slip up, but there was a reference to breakthrough cases. In fact, I don't believe that unvaccinated people can be considered a breakthrough case, as stated. Breakthrough case, I believe, means that you are vaccinated and you are still able to contract the virus, which, as pointed out, you are still able to transmit the virus. And in my mind, you are more likely to be asymptomatic, not know you have the virus, and spread it. We're, what was it? Like, I heard him in the report that it was July 4th. It was associated to definitely the holiday. I totally believe that, this new uptick. But we're, substantially past that. I want to say 6 weeks, and the numbers still seem to be the same on the reports that I'm seeing from the EOD, that 54% of the cases at East Bay MUD are breakthrough, which means they are in fact vaccinated people. So I kind of found it disturbing earlier in a reference to the customers that we would rather give the carrot than the stick. But when it comes to our employees, we're getting the stick. That was a little unsettling for me. So, I think that there's an opportunity here for this board to bring this agency together. And I don't know that intolerance is the way to do that. So I appreciate your time and ear to my concerns. And thank you for the floor. I yield.
Thank you, Gary.
Have another. Rachel Varile, your hand is up again. Or do you have additional comments, or did you just have your hand up? Okay. We have no other public comment.
Oh, no. Hello?
Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions, items for this report? All right.
Thank you,
On to the
Dave.
next item.
Okay, the last presentation is on a drought update and our drought activities. I do want to share with the board that our customers are continuing to do a fantastic job responding to our messages to conserve water. In July, our customers reduced their water use by 8.5% compared to the prior year. In August, it was 9%, and so far in September, we're down about 8%. We're also very busy preparing for the CVP water transfer this year, and as well if next year is dry. In addition, we're working with Marin Municipal Water District to see how we may be able to help and assist them without impacting our customers. Today, we'll share with you at a very high level the limitations of our ability to wheel water through the Freeport facilities to support Marin. On September 28th, we'll share with you more details on the analysis and options Marin is considering that might involve us. As I mentioned just earlier, just a second ago, our staff is really quite busy on our drought response. And we met with Marin yesterday. I did want to share that they did express their appreciation for our support, considering how busy we are. We have three presenters. We have Dave Briggs, Mike Tognolini, and Andrea Pook, who will do the update.
Director Linney, members of the board. So we are about 2 weeks away from the end of the water year, and we're projecting about 435,000 acre feet of carryover storage to start the new water year. We've confirmed our allocation with the Bureau of Reclamation at 33,250 acre feet, which is 25% of our contract. And we're going to begin diverting that water in very early October. As the board is aware, we are conducting an emergency repair of the McKelvey Aqueduct number 2. That repair is going well. It started yesterday. We expect full capacity in our aqueducts by the end of the month. We probably could start to divert our water at the end of September, but we're going to wait a few extra days and save a lot of money by getting into the off-peak pricing for energy that begins October 1st. So in addition to moving our primary allocation from the CVP, we're going to purchase an additional 2,000 acre feet of Contra Costa's CVP supply. We're going to divert that as well in October. And then additionally, an additional 3,200 acre feet of water for Contra Costa that'll be wheeled to them. That's part of the settlement agreement for the Freeport project. That will also occur in the fall. So all in all, we will move about 38,450 acre feet in the 5 months spanning October, November, December, January, and February. So that's the near-term operational plan. And for what comes after that, I will turn to Mr. Tognolini.
Thank you, Dave. Moving on to the next slide. So staff is
in the midst of planning for 2022 in the event that this coming winter is also dry. And we've set a target for ourselves, an aspirational goal to have available up to 50,000 acre feet of additional water transfers on top of whatever our CVP allocation would be. So if we were to have a CVP allocation of, again, 25%, and that's speculation, depends on hydrology, but if that were the case, we could access potentially an additional 50,000 in transfers to give us the total potential to move up to about 80 to 83,000 acre feet of water next year if it is necessary. So in order to accomplish that, we really need to use the entire capacity of the Freeport project for essentially the entire year of 2022. And what that means when it comes to potentially wheeling water for Marin in 2022 is there really is limited to no Freeport capacity available if it's needed by the district. So of course, if it's needed for our customers and to meet East Bay MUD needs, we would serve our customers first before offering any additional capacity to others such as Marin. We're in the midst of developing an MOU for a planning study where we can look more carefully at capacity constraints as well as sources of supply and how water can be moved physically through the system, potentially to be delivered to Marin if capacity were available in our supply system. I just want to point out as well that in addition to having operational constraints around Freeport, we also have staff resource limitations because we are very busy right now trying to plan for our own needs in 2022 if it is again continued drought. So our ability to support Marin's activities is very limited on the staff side as well as on the Freeport capacity end. And with that, I'll I have one more slide. State actions for the coming year. East Bay around curtailment, the state board issued curtailment orders in August. That was not unexpected for us, and it curtails our diversions of McKellamie and Bixler water rights. And when I talk about Bixler water rights, I'm talking about some small-scale diversion rights that we have to property that we own in and around the Bixler area that's used by a lessee for irrigation. That water right has also been curtailed, as well as our primary McKellamie water rights. And along with that curtailment order, there is an increased requirement for reporting. Monthly reporting started just last week. We're now reporting on a monthly basis, not just what our diversions have been, but what we're projecting that our future diversions will be with respect to our water supply needs. And now I'll hand it over to Andrea Polk, who will cover the last couple of slides.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to share with you the completion of a water supply fact sheet for the board and staff to use. My attempts to summarize our 40 years of work in 4 pages to diversify our water supply and ensure that we can weather our current and future droughts. So this piece is available for your distribution, and we'll be printing it as needed. Next slide, please. Thanks. We continue to do outreach on drought to our customers on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, and Nextdoor as well. We've been focusing on something we call the Drought Mythbusters, and we choose different topics to debunk, and it's been quite successful. We continue our media response and outreach. That has slowed down a little bit, knock on wood. And we continue drought presentations to our community and to the board. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Andrea. Can you be sure to send, since most of the passing out of literature these days seems to be electronically, if you can make sure to get that 1 page or two, just send it to all the board members.
Absolutely, no problem. It's also available on the website.
Right.
Yep.
Um, I
Oh, I'm
just
sorry,
had,
Lisa, you have your hand up.
hi, Andrea, a quick question. How's our messaging going with HOAs?
So we have been getting some inquiries as expected, Lisa, from homeowners associations or specifically from residents in those homeowners associations about, the homeowner association kind of dinging them for not watering their lawn enough and things like that. So I actually, that is something that the water conservation team has been working on. We have information on our website and we respond to those inquiries from those members of HOAs.
You know, I've been sort of recently forwarding splashes to surrounding HOAs because we're not receiving any.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope we can really improve upon that in the near future. It's desperately needed.
Absolutely. I think there's some other avenues that we can use to get that message out and better ensure that these people get that message. So we can, I'll talk with Alice about that and our team and do some social media and other outreach. And maybe we can mention the customer pipeline going forward. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And that would be great because, we always hear that, we're on next door, but people here in my neck of the woods aren't receiving these messages if they're in an HOA.
Mm-hmm.
So I just hope we can do more with that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
John.
Great presentation by staff. Thank you. It's great that we have 10,000 acre more feet in water than we forecasted. What is that attributable to?
Dave, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Director Coleman. So I think you're referring to the 435,000 acre feet that we're projecting to carry over on a couple of weeks now. Two things, conservation over the summer. So we're about, I think, 8 or 9% below last year. So that's adding water. And we also have slightly higher releases from PG&E over and above the Lodi decree, which we weren't anticipating.
Okay, great. Thank you very much on that.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
I see one hand raised from the public, President Lenny.
Okay.
Rachel Varayo. Okay, your 3 minutes will start now.
Hi, I just have one more question in response to the mandate for the vaccination. And unfortunately, my hand was raised before you guys ended that, but
Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, wanted to know, when would a complete and final copy of the policy be available to us? Because I have asked a number of different staff members whom I would think they're in a position to be able to provide that, and I have not been directed to a completed final policy. And being that we're up against the deadline and we should be able to review this with an ample amount of time so we know what exactly the process is going to be and what's required and all that, all in a final policy. I want to know where I can access that, or if it's not available yet, when will it be available and how much time are we going to have to be able to have that reviewed before you're enforcing all of these other things that you're enforcing through that policy?
So we've provided the information to the staff and different messages. And Dave, you want to answer when we can get the whole package together?
We anticipate getting it out tomorrow. We have the policy written down. It's just undergoing final review, and it'll be accompanied by an FAQ document as well. And I don't see any reason why we can't get that out tomorrow to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, again, we'll bring more information back at the next board meeting to talk about the marine transfer. That's it for the drought presentation, and last item is the monthly reports attached, and I can answer any questions the board may have.
All right, so Not seeing any there. We'll move on to reports and director comments. Committee reports, minutes from the May 17th, 2021 East Bay MUD, East Bay Regional Park District Liaison Committee meeting, and the August 24th, 2021 Redistricting Ad Hoc and Finance Administration meetings. Committee meetings are included in the agenda packet. We'll now receive a report from today's Planning Committee. Director Young.
Uh-oh.
Anyone want to substitute for Marguerite? She seems to be temporarily out of the room.
Maybe I can take a shot at it if I can find my
I know,
materials.
there she is.
Marguerite's
There's
back.
Marguerite.
Marguerite, we're at the item about the Planning Committee. You're on mute. We're eagerly awaiting.
Sorry about that. I
report.
had stepped away for just a second. The planning committee met this morning. We had a full agenda. Heard the, so let me just pull it up so I don't miss anything. Sure. Hang on just a second. We heard the annual water quality report. We heard, where did it go? There it is. Okay, got it. We heard, well, actually, the first thing we heard was the plans for updating the Orinda Water Treatment Plant, which is, we approved a couple of items today in our consent calendar on that major improvement project that will ensure that we have safe water for coming decades. It's going to take a few years to get done, several years to get done. We had the water quality program update ahead of we're meeting all water quality standards, and 120 of 124 internal higher goals. We heard about the wastewater treatment seismic retrofit program, another comprehensive report. Hats off to staff. Regulatory compliance semi-annual report, again, good progress there. And then finally, about what we're doing around fire and fuels management at Comanche Reservoir, especially focused on making sure that those who live in the mobile home park at Comanche are well protected.
All right, thank you. Other items for future consideration, please submit those items to the general manager. Any director comments?
I would simply like to ask Clifford to please continue to reach out to Bob Van Bibber up at Comanche.
Will do.
All right, any other comments? With that, then, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Be
all.
safe and be well.